hey, head, you are average. Yes, stop being afraid of that. You're average, but you can get better. Go learn, but you have to be a demon. You have to give your brain and body the impulse, adapt or die, motherfucker. I will break you in half before I give up. Once I realized that like, oh, I could just get better at sitting in this emotion. I don't have to run from this emotion. Then you begin to get stronger. You become more capable of facing things. Then if you have a value system that says, hey, Tom, don't be weak. That feeling of like you want to run and hide, stop, man up, face it, sit in it, do not allow yourself. And then when I do it, I'm like, bro, this is why you are you. This is why you've accomplished what you've accomplished. Because in this moment, everybody else runs. In this moment, everybody else breaks. In this moment, everybody else becomes so insecure that they go chase distraction, but you don't. You sit here, like even when I go to the dentist and it hurts, I open my mouth wider and I'm like, get in there. I don't flinch. I don't try to pull back. I'm like, yeah, baby, like get that drill in there. Like go on, scrape it, get down to the bone, even though it hurts and my every impulse is to pull away. If I'm dealing with something and it makes me anxious, I won't blade. Blading is where you turn sideways to something. When somebody does that to you, they're either intimidated by you, they're stressed, whatever. I will face that thing head on, literally and figuratively. If something is terrifying me, I'm like, I'm in this. I'm not running from this. I'm dealing with this. When I've got a hard thing that I don't want to do, which is almost always contracts, I'm like, here we go. We're going to do these contracts. I'm going to do this contract at 3 a.m. when everybody else, they wake up, and actually they're sleeping. Who are we kidding? They're still asleep. I'm up. I'm looking at a contract, and I am emotionally rewarding myself to the ends of the earth for doing that.
That's so cool, like so fascinating. Because so the ironic thing is I'm only distracted when I'm trying to accomplish something meaningful and hard, but it's like challenging. I'm never distracted when I'm doing something easy and fun.
That's why I think I'm right about what distraction really is. It's your brain trying to soothe you. It's grabbing a hold of all your attention and saying, don't worry about that. Put all your attention on this thing here. And now you can feel better. And I'll be honest, there are times where I have been so stressed that the only thing that's going to allow me to decompress is doom scrolling. And it's awesome. Like I am grateful that doom scrolling exists because I don't do things that aren't on my agenda. But sometimes my agenda is I need to allow myself to relax. Because there are times where even meditation is like, bro, I will get more out of this 20 minutes of meditation if I take 5 minutes to doom scroll to like to shift gears, right? Because I'm obsessively thinking about this thing. Doom scroll some cats for 5 minutes. Ooh, cool. Now I've been distracted away from that thought. Now I can sink into a meditation. Now that level of stress doesn't happen often, but when it does, I know what tool to reach for. But this goes back to self-awareness. You have to distrust yourself, constantly be asking, I should not have this reaction, right? I shouldn't allow myself to be overwhelmed. You know me, I don't do overwhelm, but I don't do overwhelm because I have pattern interrupts, doom scrolling cats. I limit it to a small amount of time. I follow it with meditation. And then I've got the value system of being hardcore, facing my challenges, so on and so forth. But it really takes that gestalt. And this is the part about helping people that I find really frustrating. It's all of those things. It is this incredibly complicated nest of rules, time blocking, value system, rewarding yourself, punishing yourself, on and on and on.
Is there a way to make those distractions, like knowing, like I'm aware of them, I'm aware that I'm easily distracted. Is there a way to make it a healthy distraction, to make it used for your benefit?
Time block it. So if you want to take something like distraction and make it healthy, you need to have parameters. So you're going to time block. You're going to have it be a known tool. So you're not going to, like I catch myself doing sometimes, blindly reach for your phone. If you find yourself picking up your phone, you've got to be like, why am I doing this? Does this fit into my rules? Did I say, hey, I'm now going to look at cats for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, whatever. But like, that is the amount of time that I'm going to do that. I'm going to confine it to that. And then it's like, hey, if you want to spend 10 hours a day looking at cats, I'm not judging. Like if your life is rad and you're stoked, spending 10 hours a day looking at cats, just don't trick yourself into thinking, oh, I want to go, build a huge charity and help millions of people, and doom scroll cats for 10 hours. Like, those two things are mutually incompatible. So it's only the unintentional use of that, the unrestrained use of that. So once it becomes intentional, you're using it as a tool for a specific reason that you can articulate to yourself, and it's time blocked, you're good.
So for those people who do, maybe they aren't aware, or they understand but have so much dopamine and just like habitual of just going to TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, just scrolling for days to pass the time, to do whatever. How do you go about changing that behavior if you're already so entrenched in it?
I come down to one thing, George. Like, you're young, so I really want you to hear me. Your life is a confusing mess right now, and that will manifest as negative emotion. It's all going to pass. I've glimpsed your future. It all works out. It's amazing. Your life becomes wonderful because as you get older, you're going to gain control of your emotions. As you gain control of your emotions, you're going to gain control of your time. As you gain control of your time, you're going to acquire skills. As you acquire skills, you're going to be able to do things that other people can't do. Like, that really is the loop. And so as people get older, the reason that they tend to be happier and more self-assured is they realize the rules of the game, that you can just really get better at this stuff and you can get good. And so I want people to hear that. But my thing is, like, dude, you've really got to be obsessed with what you want to accomplish. And so if I could get you to understand, bro, all your dreams, maybe the scale will be off. Maybe you want to be the greatest and you become, 1,142. But out of 7.4 billion, that's really pretty cool. And so that's going to be the ride of your life, but you have to get obsessed. And the only reason that obsession is fun is because you actually know you're going to make progress. It's when you're obsessed and things aren't going well and you don't realize it's just a matter of time. And so, like, right now, dude, I am really emotionally worried for people that don't understand the economy is going to turn back around. Wars end, like, they're devastating. I don't wish it on anybody, but this too shall pass. It's like the great Buddhist phrase of all time. This too shall pass. If you knew that, yeah, the next 3 years are going to suck, but after that, it's going to be dope, man. And there's going to be a stretch of 7 years that are nothing but awesomeness. But then you're going to go through an 18-month period. One of your loved ones is going to pass away, and that's going to be brutal. But then you're going to have a stretch of 6 years. It's going to be awesome. Then you're going to have 4 years of just total suck. But through it all, you're going to be getting better and better at managing your emotions. So through it all, all is going to be well. That's the joy, man. And so the thing I'm always trying to get people to understand, you'll never get what you want out of life. You're never going to accomplish the things that you want unless you are obsessed. Obsession will hurt and it will be unhealthy unless you realize that you can get better. And if you value yourself for already being good, right, better, faster, stronger, life will be a misery no matter what. And so far better to focus on, did I leave it all out on the field today, right? So value yourself for how hard you went after something, not for what you accomplished. And then let yourself get obsessed with something because you'll get better over time.
And then with that obsession, what if it's an obsession with something that's not productive or unhealthy, like video games, for example?
Who said that's not productive and who said it's unhealthy? So there's only that which moves me towards my goals and that which moves me away from my goals. Now, I'll make one caveat. Your goals should be honorable. I'll define honorable. An honorable goal is something that uplifts you and other people. That's about as simple as I can make it. So if you have a goal that uplifts you and other people, then why not go just absolutely bonkers to make it come true? If you want to be a professional gamer, then that's going to be playing a lot of video games. And I never would have believed this is true, but I enjoy watching other people play video games. It's fun. And so if that's the way that you want to contribute, that for people that want to watch you play, they can, amazing. So now it's uplifting you and other people. You'll be able to get into the passion loop so that you're both the shout and the echo, the shout being you playing, the echo being people enjoying watching you play. Or maybe you're like playing video games so you can help build video games, right? So there's many ways that you can do something like that. So I just want people to have an honorable goal and then ask themselves of everything you do, did this move you towards your goal? Yes or no? If yes, keep doing it. If no, stop doing it. And that's it. And that literally is the easiest way to steer. But people let things complicate that because their parents tell them that they should be doing something that maybe they do or don't want to do. They think that they should be making a ton of money, and the thing that they love doesn't make them a lot of money. They want to be the best, and they trick themselves into thinking this is only fun if I'm the greatest of all time. I will tell you right now, I play the video game Destiny 2, and I would laugh, I'm sure, if I saw the people that are spanking me. I mean, just embarrassing me. But I still love it. And so I try to remind myself that it's about getting better when I play, because I love to improve. And it's just, video games are designed to squeeze the brain centers that evolution has given you for progression and goal acquisition and all that stuff. So it is a very fun microcosm. So I think people have to be very careful casting aspersions, moral judgments on any goal that is uplifting you and other people.
Do you think that there is a way to incorporate your passion, which could be video games, into purpose and also providing service, and have that work for you? Or do you think you have to sacrifice one, or focus on a certain thing first? Is there a perfect world where all three can exist?
I think all three can exist, but greatness makes demands. So hiding in that, meaning and purpose will all but break you, because the world is constantly moving towards entropy. So from the moment of the Big Bang, everything is moving towards chaos. Now, when you introduce humans, Jesus, you magnify the amount of chaos 10,000-fold. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. We ourselves are complicated, bumping into all people that are complicated as well. And so to achieve something great, you are really going to fail a lot. You are going to run into more obstacles than you can count. But the problem is that fulfillment requires that you work hard, partly because that for humans to become the most dominant predator the world has ever seen, we had to be very good at ordering the world. To order the world, you have to pour a tremendous amount of energy to stop the chaos and move it towards order, because that's the other part of that equation. To bring order to a system, you must pour energy into it, literal energy. And so that's the battle that all of us are fighting against. And so if we know that meaning and purpose is the only thing that will ever serve you long term, that is how you get to fulfillment, and to do meaning and purpose, we know it's going to be brutally difficult, then the very thing that makes life worth living is going to be very hard. It will bring you to your knees. I have literally been brought to my knees. But as you get back up, which I encourage everyone to do, because we're all going to get brought to our knees, but not everybody's going to get back up. So if you get brought to your knees, don't worry about, that doesn't make you a loser, but it does mean that you're on your knees, and it does mean you owe yourself getting back up. Now, when you get back up, that's going to make you feel some kind of way about yourself. You can be like, yo, that didn't break me. That's incredible. So having meaning and purpose means, by definition, you are going to be brought to your knees at some point. You are going to fail to have the impact that you want to have in the world. And if you're ever going to have that and feel the way you want to feel, you have to get back up and keep going.
We've been talking a lot about ambition and drive and getting your goals. I know another big part of your life is your relationship. So how does your relationship fit into your good life with your ambition? And how does that all cocktail work in your life?
The good life, how to live it. Step one, you're having a biological experience. What does that mean? You are an animal that's been shaped by evolution. The more you understand the organ of the brain, really the whole body, the microbes in it, all of it, the more you understand that biological system, the more you're going to be able to predict the outcome of your thoughts and actions. And so if you're trying to have a good life, one, you're going to want to define it, which I will say the good life is fulfillment. It's the only emotional state that is resilient to everything from anger, loss, and grief. Through all of that, you can be fulfilled. You may be devastated, and when you lose a loved one, it's devastating. It sucks. There's nothing fun about it. But that doesn't mean that I'm not fulfilled as a human. It just means that I'm a fulfilled human going through something brutal. Conversely, if I'm momentarily happy, but nothing is going right in my life, I'm not contributing in any meaningful way, I can laugh for 5 minutes and still be depressed. So fulfillment, I would say, is the only thing that's resilient. You're not going to be depressed and fulfilled at the same time. It's just not. Now that we have a definition for what the good life is, now we can actually begin moving towards it. Now, the reason I say that step one is recognizing that you're having a biological experience is I understand the things that are going to lead to fulfillment. One of them is working really hard. Another one is following or developing a passion that lets you contribute, that's number 3, to the group and to yourself. So if those are the rough ingredients that make up this cocktail of fulfillment, we have to figure out this idea of contributing to the group. What's that all about? That's about being a social animal. Now, what's the ultimate iteration of being a social animal? It is love. Now, why is love so potent? Because nature has one aim and one aim only. The reason you are a social animal is because of this one reason. The reason that you have drive and ambition is because of this one reason. Nature's only goal, this is it, this is the punchline of everything. Your motivation for sitting here right now, my motivation for answering these questions, the reason that we put these cameras together, built this channel, all of it is for one thing, because nature wants to make sure that you have kids that have kids. That's it. And now everything in your brain is nature pulling levers to make sure that you live long enough to have kids and that you actually have kids. So love, which I will say is a neurochemical state, is nature's way of going, yo, I want to make sure you do this thing. So it's this incredible cocktail of, obviously there's different kinds of love. I will assume you mean romantic love since you referenced my relationship. So romantic love is like the thing. It is the thing that when you think about how people want to feel, in fact, when they have people describe how they want to feel and they look at that neurochemistry, you know what it most closely matches, even though this isn't the word that people put to it? Do you have a guess?
Like, it looks like you're on drugs or something.
It's an orgasm. And so it makes sense that if nature's job is to make sure that you stay alive long enough to have kids that have kids, that the neurochemical cocktail of an orgasm be pretty high on people's list. So as people are describing it, they're like, oh yeah, that's the neurochemical state you feel right after an orgasm. So technically it isn't the orgasm itself, but it's that cocktail afterwards. All the bonding hormones are secreted after that. You can actually predict, I don't know with what degree of accuracy, but I'm going to guess it is extraordinarily high, that you can predict who will stay married by the number of receptors that they have for, I think it's vasopressin, which is one of the bonding hormones. So there's oxytocin and vasopressin are the two biggest, the ones where it's like the cuddle hormones. So that's the kind of feeling over time that you want to have for somebody. Why? Because then you're more likely to have kids. And then you're likely to raise them long enough that they have kids. Because it's not just having kids, it's having kids that have kids. So you have to keep them alive. And all of the crazy things that nature does to do that are incredible. But nature only has 2 levers, pleasure and pain. And one of those tremendous pleasures that nature will give you that is extraordinarily resilient to suffering and loss and sadness and all that is that really deep love, not the early lusty stuff. That's super fun, but like that really deep, I have shared a life. I don't know who I am without this person. Love that you can have with another person if you're leveraging all of that neurochemical cocktail of soaking in the bonding so that over time, that sense of love is like nothing can touch it. Nothing can give me that, right? I've made a lot of money in a single day, right? 9 figures in a single day. I'll let people go put in a calculator 9 figures to see just how much that is in a single day, okay? It's a dope feeling. But it's not love. Love trumps everything I've ever been through in my life when it's sustained. And so I put a lot of energy into it, a lot of energy, because it gives me back more than anything else in my life.
So you mentioned how nature has programmed you to have kids who have kids, and you made a personal decision not to do that. Why did you opt out of what nature wants?
Why I opted out of it, we'll get to in a second. But the fact that we can all opt out is fun because I'm like, ha, I got you, bitch. It's like nature thought she had me, but I'm not playing that game. So here's the thing. I really want kids to this day. I really want kids. There are still moments where I'll see that thing that's like, ooh, man, it triggers all of my desire to have kids. And I'm like, man, I am very sad that I can't both have the life that I'm living and have the life where I have kids. But I looked at my life from several different vantage points. What my wife calls the average Wednesday. So what would an average Wednesday look like if I had kids? And I know myself And I feel a tremendous amount of obligation. In fact, part of the reason that I work as hard as I do at Impact Theory is I feel an obligation to you guys. I feel an obligation to the team. And I take that seriously in ways that I think most people would be distressed by. And so for me, it's like, okay, I really need to think about that. If I had kids, I would feel a huge obligation to them to come home. And so one thing that I like about work is that I don't feel conflicted. Lisa and I are building it together. So as I put energy into this, I'm putting energy into something that I'm doing with my wife. So that doesn't feel like it's fragmented energy. It feels like it's coming together. That was obviously on purpose. I'm building a company that brings many of my passions, not all of them, but many of my passions together. So even as I pursue things that I would do no matter what, I'm also building the business. And I do that because I know I'm going to feel that sense of obligation. So let me make sure that I'm doing things that I love to satisfy that obligation. If I had kids, now when I'm at work, I would feel like I should be with my kids. When I'm with my kids, I would feel like I should be at work. I just know that about myself. So I want to be really honest. And then you don't miss what you don't have. So it's not like I had a 7-year-old and they died. Just never had kids, right? So kids are a thought. So I can think, and I'll have those moments sometimes of really intense, like, oh, dude, like you see that moment. Like, have you guys seen that TikTok trend where it's like they do like there's a song and they like propose to their daughter and they have the daughter recording. She doesn't realize she's recording herself. And she's like looking at them with like awe and joy. I'm like, oh God, like that hits me right in the feels. And I'm like, oh man, I want to have a daughter.
Or like the Jordan Peterson one, you know that one where they have like kids will not always be kids. They'll grow up. And
I haven't seen it.
And it's just like people videoing their kids going up from like a kid to like 5 years old.
Even hearing about that kicks me in the feels.
You just makes a somersault, like Lisa says.
Yes. Oh yeah. My suddenly I have a uterus as well. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That kind of thing, like they really, really hit me. So, but anyway, I can set that aside because I'm like, my marriage is amazing. I fully understand nature's trick, which is when you have a kid, the child will be your number one priority. And right now, Lisa's my number one priority. I don't know that this is a stat, but I'd be willing to bet that relationships are more likely to break up or be dysfunctional. That's a better way to say it. Relationships are more likely to be dysfunctional if you have kids. So even people that stay together, I think it's a higher likelihood that stop being a very thriving emotional and sexual relationship if you have kids. So I'm super thoughtful about that. And then again, average Wednesday, I hate like doing things that kids want to do and stuff like that. I have so little time. It's like, I want to do the things I want to do. And then when I look back on my life and walk through all the different moments, because all of our lives are broken into phases, I look at the different phases. It's not until I'm in my 60s that I start to go, ooh, I think that having kids will like be pretty important to me. And by the time I'm 80, I will regret it. There's no doubt about that. But because I've thought through it, I'll know how to deal with that frame of reference when I get there so that I don't get destroyed by it. Because it's when people are caught off guard by a frame of reference. And explaining a frame of reference is beyond the scope of this conversation. But when you get to that frame of reference, you see life through that. And when you get caught off guard, like by having a kid and you didn't think through that well, or not having kids and you didn't think through that well, at last check, the most unhappy people in America are mid-30s female lawyers because they've chosen career over children, and they are now at that moment where it's like, whoa, is this really what I want for my life? Now, maybe other occupations, they love it and it's not a problem. But for whatever reason, 35-year-old women, attorneys, it's emotional implosion time. So that's somebody who did not think through what are the different phases of my life. Like, it's dope in my early 20s where I'm like, yo, I'm proving I can do anything I set my mind to. I'm grinding, I'm making a ton of money. This is rad. And then you realize, oh, wait a second, maybe there are other things that I didn't think through. But if you think through that and you're like, oh, in my mid-30s, I may want kids, but you know what? I'd actually rather play my career out. Now at least you're not taken by surprise. So you can plan around, okay, I better have a career that gives me those things. Thinking through that, I think, is very important. I know when I get to 80 that I will be very grateful that I thought through how my frame of reference will change. And so I will make plans to be able to mentor people, in fact, I'm starting to do that now, even just in the way that I shift my own thinking thinking about myself more as like a father trying to like, hey, I've suffered in my life. I want other people to learn easily what I have learned through great suffering, which is, of course, one of the things that makes being a parent cool. It's like, hey, I can help you hopefully make your life a little bit better. And so that part of being a parent, I can express in a lesser way. I'm very well aware of that through the people in the company, through the people that watch the content. So being aware of how the frames of reference shift is important. But anyway, that's how the way I've thought about pulling a fast one on Mother Nature to the extent that you can, but it's a trade-off. You can reboot your life, your health, even your career, anything you want. All you need is discipline. I can teach you the tactics that I learned while growing a billion-dollar business that will allow you to see your goals through. Whether you want better health, stronger relationships, a more successful career, any of that is possible with the mindset and business programs in Impact Theory University. Join the thousands of students who have already accomplished amazing things. Tap now for a free trial and get started today.
What are like 3 behaviors that you do to reinforce your love for Lisa that other people can put into their relationships?
Okay, so this is huge. 1, don't criticize, compliment. So when I was young and you get together and you're in that relationship and everything is great, but then you start living together and like that super drug-like early days starts to wear off and all of a sudden it's all the things that they do that drive you crazy. And you're like, hey, could you not do that? You know, when you do that, it really bugs me. Hey, oh God, stop. Why are you doing it like that? And I was like, wow, when she does it to me, that drives me crazy. So I was like, you know what? Every time I have an impulse to criticize her, instead, I'm going to reach for a real compliment. I'm never going to lie. I'm not going to BS, but I'm going to reach for a real compliment. What that does is it pattern interrupts in my own brain. So I'm not reinforcing the negative thing because it really is negative. Like the person really is doing something that drives you crazy. And it probably really is a dumb thing that if you could wave a wand to make go away, you would. And so it's not even like I'm saying that annoying thing isn't actually annoying. It is. But if I obsess over it, all I'm going to see is the annoying thing. Whereas that positive thing is also real. So I want to make sure I'm spending my time thinking about the positive thing. So don't criticize, compliment. Always make it real. But spend your time in the compliment. Have a lot of sex. Just real. Like even now in my 40s, it is so funny. In my late 40s, I can think back to what I was like in my early 20s, my poor wife. And like going through that and thinking, oh, it's going to be like this forever. It's not. Like as your hormones change. And I know that I'm only 1 testosterone injection from being right back there, but it feels more manageable. Whereas before I felt like a drug addict who couldn't focus, it's like now I feel like, hey, I have a healthy relationship with this drug. I'm a recreational user now instead of an addict, which is way better. And so being in that space though, I've realized it's still critically important. It is a thing that is unlike anything else in your life. It's the only person that you have that relationship with, if you're monogamous, and that's not an overvote for monogamy, but monogamy has a really potent upside. And so being in a monogamous relationship and knowing that that's my one outlet for that, you realize that sex is this fascinating thing that is a mode that we all go into. And going back to nature wants to make sure that you have kids that have kids, it's like nature made sure that that was an awesome thing that is unlike anything else. And so I'm legitimately freaked out by how much less sex young people are having now because they're missing out on something incredibly potent. Now, I'm only vouching for sex with connection. I won't say that it has to be a marriage because I've had my share of non-marital sex and it was awesome and I'm not denigrating that at all. But I've always found that it's way more enjoyable if it's somebody that you have a real connection with. So, but thinking about it like that, it is this mode that you don't get anywhere else. If you have a spouse and you have what they call bed death, that relationship is going to become dry and brittle. That's metaphoric, obviously, but that you'll get the right idea in your head. Whereas if you maintain a sexual relationship, you're constantly crossing this weird boundary into like this completely unique space that you only have with that person, and nature is squeezing this neurochemistry that constantly bonds you, brings you back together. So that's hugely important. I cannot stress that enough. And then number 3, you have to be a high-level communicator. You've got to invest in saying things that you don't want to say. And I think one of the biggest breakthroughs in my marriage was when I finally realized that I had to say out loud anytime insecurity was driving me. because then my wife could help me. And as long as she never weaponized the insecurity against me, now it's not my wife's problem to solve. Now, hopefully she can help me overcome that. That would be amazing, but it's not, she doesn't need to solve that problem. It's my problem to solve. But she can't weaponize my insecurities against me. And by me articulating them, now we know what's actually going on. So we're not arguing about a surface level thing. We get to the real issue that's driving it. We can both process through that together. And so now you don't have stupid fights that last forever. You're getting to the root cause of the issue. I mean, this is exactly like in medicine. Don't treat the symptom, find the underlying cause. But when you are arguing, you have friction in your marriage, you have to figure out the underlying cause. And I promise you, it's either a collision of values. So you both understand each other. You just disagree that that's how the world should be. It's misaligned base assumptions. So you are viewing the world in a way that you don't even realize you're doing it. So people don't realize what their base assumption is. It's what they call an axiom. You just live by it. Like, oh, I assume that emotion is very distressful for you. So why wouldn't you want to solve the problem? You assume that I know that it's not uncomfortable to sit in a negative emotion. Those are base assumptions. But in reality, my base assumption is you're in so much pain right now from this emotion. The only thing that makes sense is for us to solve that problem. And your base assumption is, dude, how can I solve a problem if I haven't had a chance to sit in it yet? But if we don't say that, I'm trying to solve the problem. You're like, asshole, just listen, right? And so when two smart people are colliding, they need to check their base assumptions first. Like, what's your base assumption? That I need to sit with this emotion before I can problem solve. I need to problem solve to even think straight. Cool, now we can begin to understand each other. So it's either values, it's misaligned base assumptions, or you've got an insecurity that's driving you and you either aren't aware of it or you're not being honest about it. And so if you get that stack right, then all of a sudden communication becomes very easy. But man, you've got to be emotionally naked. And that is very, very difficult, but it is hyper rewarding if you have a partner that doesn't use it against you.
So everybody sees how strong, your relationship is with Lisa, how amazing it is, how deep, but then also people see how amazing the career side of it is. Like your business impact theory is growing, it's thriving. And I just want to know how you balance that to keep both of them leveled up so evenly, to keep them both growing, and what your advice would be to people who don't know how to balance their relationship and their business or their work.
So if you want to balance things, you have to know thyself. So just a few days ago, I sent Lisa a text that hurt her feelings, and I didn't mean it to. I said, hey, would you mind if we did this business thing on a day that was special for her and I? And I even said, you're probably going to hate this idea, but, because remember, I feel a tremendous obligation to work for you guys and to make sure that the company thrives and all that. So I'm always thinking like, hey, this would be really good for the team. Now, Lisa's stated role, it's not like she would be confused. If she heard me say this, she'd be like, yeah, that's my role. Her stated role is to be the early warning system, because I don't see the problem coming in the relationship as quickly as she does. So we refer to it as being disconnected, where I work so much that we start to feel disconnected. So thank you for saying that people see my relationship as thriving, and I would say that it is, but it's because we have these bumpers. And I'll bump up against it, as I did just a few days ago. And I sent that thing and said, hey, let's do this business. I know this is that really special day for us, but let's do this because I think it'd be good for the team. And she said, hey, that hurts my feelings that you would even ask, because it makes me feel not heard and not understood, because 2022 was the hardest year of my business life. And for 8 months, she let me work 120 hours a week. That's not even getting a full night's sleep. That's working around the clock, 7 days a week. I mean, it's pandemonium, and I do not recommend it. I'm not proud of myself for doing it. It was actually a result of mistakes. Do I think I'm a badass for doing it? Yes. But do I think it was a problem of my own making? Very much so. So my wife was very understanding through that. Now, I promised her that I would find my way back to her, which I did. And so, but now she's very gun shy of like, hey, I gave you grace and latitude for 8 months. And now you want to do a work thing on our special day that makes me feel very unheard. Now, if either thing happens poorly in that moment, we have a problem. But Lisa and I do that movement well. She speaks up and says, hey, it bothered me that you even asked. And I'm like, oh, damn. Like, I don't like that it bothers you that I ask, because your role is to play that person where I can say, hey, let's do this. And you say, early warning, don't do that. So she had to be graceful in that moment and say, cool, I'm not going to double down. I'm not going to be angry. Let's not do that. As the early warning system, I'm telling you, we can't do it. And then if in that moment I'm like, yo, what the fuck? Like, come on, this will be better for the business. I thought we were in this together. Then she's going to feel abandoned in the marriage. So I'm like, hey, your stated role is to be the one to say, nope, that will lead to us feeling disconnected. And so when you say it, even though I have an impulse to go in the opposite direction and I'm not feeling disconnected, and that feels like a really small thing to me, that's your role, word. So I'm going to immediately back off, totally. I'm actually sorry that I asked because I didn't mean to upset you. And I totally get where you're coming from. I hear you, like we're on it. And so now we move on. I'm more thoughtful about, okay, fair, like the 8 months is pretty intense. I totally get why she's saying that. Next time I'm going to try to catch myself before I ask. But if I do, she's not going to be upset, but she is going to check it and say, you can't do that. So it's one, understanding it takes constant maintenance. There is no such thing as, oh, my marriage is great and it will remain great forever. My marriage is great because we work on it every single day. Now, balancing the business in that, it doesn't mean that I give more time to my marriage, because I don't. I give more time to the business, but it does mean that I prioritize my marriage. So if my wife says, hey, we can't do that thing, then we're not going to do it. Like I will just tell you, the CFO pulled Lisa and I aside and was like, yo, 2 weeks of Christmas, crazy town, can't do it. And I was like, I'm just telling you right now, 2 weeks of Christmas every year from now until the end of time, because like the rest of my life, I make it about my business. For 2 weeks, I'm not a businessman, I'm a family man. It is what it is. And he was like, okay, cool. Like totally on board. I get it. But that's one of those, you have to know, like, I need to do this set of 32 things to make sure that my marriage is always thriving. And they don't always mean the most time. Now, it's not an accident that Lisa and I build the company together. I would never be able to work as much as I do if we didn't. And I know this because the first company that when I got into entrepreneurship, for 8 years, she wasn't. And it was a nightmare. And even though I worked less, it was harder on the marriage than when I'm working more now, because we're in it together and we share, the same stories and the same people and wants and all that good stuff.
I read Feeling Great. You mentioned it earlier. And I might inflame the comment section by saying this, but I feel like if that book exists, then like why do people who read it don't suddenly oh, now I'm no longer depressed or no longer feeling anxious in that sense? Because he lays out all the steps very clearly. So what do you think is the thing that causes people to just not be transformed from reading a book? Is it the number 3 thing that you said early in the beginning, just not enough repetition? It just hurts the first time that they do it, so they don't follow through. What is the thing that
I think the big reason that people struggle to get out of depression, even if they've read a book like Feeling Great, is that one, they don't believe the following very inflammatory statement, that you can get control of your neurochemistry. And they think that it's all in the mind, and they don't realize that it's a far more complicated beast than that. But because they don't believe that they can completely get control of it, they will try a few things early on and stop. Now, if you have depression and you are not dealing with the body, your microbiome very specifically, then the odds of you getting out of that depression are virtually zero. And so even a book as extraordinary as Feeling Great is only dealing with the psychological component of depression, and it is far deeper than that. So your gut controls many of your neurotransmitters, and serotonin, so SSRIs are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, meaning they keep more serotonin floating in your body. Now, 70% of the serotonin in your body is produced and stored in the gut. So if the very chemical that they use to combat depression is in your gut and you're not dealing with your gut, now you have a problem. But it goes back to what I call the only belief that matters. If people don't think, oh, I can control this, then they won't keep going until they find that root cause. So they think that this is that thing that happened to me. A tragedy befell me, and therefore I'm never going to be able to get out of this. This is because of the trauma that I went through in childhood. Yes, partly, But you can get out of that. You can unwind that stuff. And I am not in any way, shape, or form saying this to be flippant. I am not trying to diminish the terrifying grip that is depression. I'm just saying you have to believe that you can get your way out of it. And yes, it is hyper complicated. And having watched Lisa go through an extraordinary battle with her microbiome and seeing how complicated it is to undo all that, the psychological side's already bad enough, especially if it's a result of trauma, abuse, where that gets hardwired in. I mean, that's in your nervous system in a deep way that is going to be very complex to unwind. But it starts with believing that you can unwind it. And then doing something like cognitive behavioral therapy, where you go through, I forget how many, it's like 13 steps. And one of the steps is like the 15 cognitive distortions. I mean, it's crazy. So it is already a very complex book, just cognitively, psychologically, that takes a lot of repetition, which requires you to believe that it's going to work. But then it's also the very difficult part of getting your body right. Sleep, exercise, diet. You want to talk about, hey, let's really light the comment section on fire. Remind people that what they eat is going to influence their microbiome, is going to influence their production of serotonin, is going to influence their sleep, is going to influence depression, anxiety, all of it. It just is. And if you're eating junk food, you are making everything worse. Not a moral judgment, it's just a biological reality. Now, if you can strip away the moral judgment and realize you're not a bad person if you eat junk food, but you are a person that's creating obstacles for feeling good. So all I'm saying is remove the obstacles. Now, there are people in my life that I love that put every food obstacle in their way humanly possible. They are actively in pain and they actively tell me how much they're suffering and they actively ask me what they should do to stop suffering, and they keep doing it. Does that mean that I think they are a worse person? Not in the slightest. I love them just as much. I think they're just as valuable as a human being, and I really wish that they would remove the moral judgment from themselves, because it is not a moral question. It is 100% entirely a question of, this path leads to one outcome, this path leads to a different outcome. Pick the path where you like the outcome, and then walk that path. And so people have to recognize, I can do that, that it is cause and effect. There's nothing mythological about this. It's cause and effect, but it is hyper complicated. It is both psychology and physiology. Unwinding that will almost certainly require that you get help from professionals and other people. And so the shortest answer in the world to your question is, it's complicated.
Just rewatch this episode.
But even that, now how do you go in and do, Lisa had me by her side, and it still took 5 years to get back to baseline with her microbiome. And man, when you're in the thick of it, the whole time you're asking, is this actually going to work? Because some days it doesn't feel like it. Some days it feels like this is going to be forever. And it's not until you look back a year and go, yeah, wow, that's right. I actually have 17 more foods that I can eat now that I couldn't eat before. But I still, 3 days a week, have just absolute agony in my gut. And so this still sucks. And then 2 years you look back and you're like, oh, wow, I'm only having that 2 days a week. 4 years in, you're like, oh, that's right, I only have it occasionally. And then 5 years in, you're like, God, this took a very long time. But there's a lot of dark days for somebody struggling with depression. But if you don't believe that you can unwind it, if you don't believe that you're in control, even though it's very complicated, then you'll never do it. And having been a victim of something would be horrible. But you now have to take control and say, okay, this sucks. I can't undo the past, but I always can control how I react to that thing. Don't take my word for it. Read Man's Search for Meaning. That is the ultimate form of abuse. He was in a concentration camp. So nobody's got a trump card to play on him, right? And his punchline is, it's all about how you process it emotionally.
So if you can share, in that 5 years, were there days that Lisa just did not believe?
Oh, yeah. Well, they were the darkest days of my marriage. They were depression. They were me being afraid she was going to die because she was so sick. There was her being so fed up. I don't even want to try anymore. Why try? Why bother? There's no point. It's like, wow, that's hard. There were times where she would respond to love with just rejection and anger. It was like, what is happening? And so it was brutal. And we didn't know. I mean, you had to have blind faith that it was going to work. But did I know it was going to work? No. And there were times where even I was like, I have to act as if this is going to work, but I've never been through this before. And this is early, man. We as like a mainstream society have only known about the microbiome for like 10 years. Like a year before Lisa got sick, I'd never even heard of the microbiome. So it's like, dude, this stuff is so complex that it does feel like a big question mark. But I will just say there is a solution to every problem.
So is it just that you guys just sleep it off and tomorrow you'll feel better again? Or like, what is like that thing to get back to baseline and not that, what do you call it? Like, not exaggeration, but like magnification of the problem.
Catastrophic thinking.
Yeah, catastrophizing it.
So the only way to stop catastrophizing is to pattern interrupt that, not allow yourself to wallow in that cognitive distortion, to say, I'm going to base things on fact, and then have a growth mindset. When you have a growth mindset, you have the only belief that matters, which is that if I put time and energy into getting better at this thing, I will actually get better at this thing. So if I put time and energy into learning about the microbiome, I will learn about the microbiome. So when I went into it, I said to Lisa, look, I'm going to go learn about the microbiome. And I would wake up every morning, and the first thing I would do is I would spend a couple of hours researching the microbiome. And I just thought, cool, let's say that there's no doctor in the world that can solve her problem. I'm going to learn enough about it to do it myself. And so when you go into it with the arrogance of belief, and it's like, cool, I don't need somebody else to know this. I will put all the pieces together. Now, thankfully, it didn't end up needing to be that. But because I approached it like that I'll read the studies, I will learn all of these things. I'll do research if I have to. I will buy a microscope and start doing laboratory tests. But when you approach something like that, which is how I approach all of life, you realize, oh, I get it. Other people don't succeed at whatever because they're not willing to be absurd. They're not willing to say, I'll become a Nobel Prize winning scientist to solve my wife's problem. If you're willing to say that and actually act in accordance, it's unreal what you can accomplish. Now, obviously, we solved the problem long before I had to become a Nobel Prize winning scientist. But the fact that I was willing to move like one, the fact that I was willing to go, yeah, I can do this. I can become that. I'm not yet. I'm going to have to learn a lot. I'm going to have to figure out how to read abstracts and do research and fine. I'm not going to let my wife die. My number one priority is making sure that we get her back on track. And then you go at it like a freak of nature. But most people cannot do the first part, which is to believe that it's fucking possible. And this is what I want to scream to people is like, hey, fuckhead, you are average. Yes, stop being afraid of that. You're average, but you can get better. Go fucking learn. But you have to be a demon. You have to give your brain and body the impulse. Adapt or die, motherfucker. I will break you in half before I give up. When I put on the muscle mass, because boy, did I used to be a lot smaller. When I would show up to the gym every day, I had to say adapt or die. And I would just tell myself, adapt or die. Motherfucker, I will, meaning my body, I'm going to keep pushing you. Scream and cry all you want. We're doing this. And I would lift to the point, I remember one time, this is when I was broke, I couldn't even unlock my car from the door. I had to lean across. So open the passenger side to lean across to the driver's side. And I had worked out so hard that I couldn't hold up my own weight. And I put my arm in the seat to reach across and my arm gave out and I literally just poof, face planted into the seat. But you have to attack everything you do like that. And when you go that hard, you will be shocked. Everything will relent to your superior will. Everything will relent to your superior will. Never forget that.
The reason most people fail to achieve their goals is twofold. Number one, they don't have a sufficient level of clarity. And number two, they don't want it badly enough. The statistic is that 92% of all people that set a New Year's resolution fail to stick with it. The way that you go from being in the 92% to being in the 8% is by having a freakish level of clarity and building so much desire in your life that nothing could stop you even if it tried. This is what you need to do. The clarity piece is really the most important thing that you can have in your life. And most people have a really vague sense of clarity, but because they can say in a sentence something like, I'm going to win a gold medal, they think they have the clarity that they need. But the question I would ask somebody that told me that they wanted to win a gold medal is a gold medal in what? The Olympics? Yes, Tom, I want to win a gold medal in the Olympics. Amazing. Which event? Swimming or tennis? Swimming, fantastic. The breaststroke, the freestyle medley, what's it going to be? You have to get so specific with your goal that you know what to do with the next 15 minutes of your life. Ultimately, success, accomplishing a goal, seeing things through, all come down to what you're doing with your time and what part of your potential you're turning into actual usable skill set. The only way to know how to spend your time transferring your potential into skill set is to have a truly granular level of clarity. You cannot stop at the high level, and you can't do what a lot of people do, which is they, as the Brits say, they waffle. So when they're describing their goal, they either say something like, I want to win a gold medal, which we just covered as hopelessly vague, or they say something that's even worse, which is, I really want to do something great with my life. I know that I'm capable. I was really athletic when I was a kid, and I know that if I applied myself, I could probably really, recapture what I was doing. That's how most people describe what they want to do in life. It is terrifying. You need to be able to state what your goal is in a single sentence with no commas, parentheticals, run-ons. It needs to be a very simple and direct goal. Something like, I'm going to win a gold medal in the Summer Olympics freestyle medley swimming event by 2028, whatever. Once you have a goal that is that specific, that contains the what you're going to do, the by when, and the how much, then you know that you actually have a real goal and not a hope, not a vague idea, but you have something very concrete and specific that you can execute against. Now remember, the goal is to translate that into what you're going to do with the next 15 minutes of your life, always and forever, on and on and on. When you have something so specific that you know how to break it down into those incremental steps, you can really begin to make progress. If you've ever heard the idea of the 10,000 hour principle, it's talking about how we go about actually achieving mastery in something. And the punchline is that you spend 10,000 hours applying yourself in a disciplined fashion towards your goal. The disciplined fashion is born out of the clarity. It's born out of the clarity of knowing precisely what you're trying to achieve and by when, and knowing how to take advantage of, I've tried something, it didn't quite work, I need to get a little bit better, or this part of my game is weak, I need to focus on getting better at that thing. But again, all of that is born from clarity and being able to break down that clarity into action items, which is absolutely critical because action items are how we're going to turn our potential into skill set. And that is the critical chain that you have to walk. And then from there, it's about developing the self-awareness that you need to know what part of you is improving and what part of you is not improving. So that brings us to the second thing. They don't want it badly enough. The reality is that most people, even if they can get the clarity that they want in their life, they really just don't want it that badly. Most people, myself, you, all of us, the things that we really want, the things that we want as badly as a drowning man wants their next breath of air, those things, those you're going to get. The things where it's like, yeah, I want it. Yeah, that would be cool. I promise you it's going to get way too hard and you're not going to be able to achieve that. And the reason is that the second law of thermodynamics is that everything moves towards chaos. So everything is hard. That's the really simple way of saying it. And if we know that everything is going to be hard, then we have to have a reason that we're going to overcome that difficulty. We have to have a reason to keep fighting through the inevitable boredom that comes from trying to clock our 10,000 hours into actually getting good at something. Or even if your goal is more modest than truly mastering something, no matter what it is, even if it's trying to read a book a week or something like that, inevitably, life gets in the way. Inevitably, we get sick, we get tired, other things pop up. A goal cannot be the thing that you hope life doesn't get in the way of. A goal, if you want to be in that 8%, if you want to see things through, a goal has to be the thing that you absolutely demand of yourself that you achieve. And there unfortunately is no way around that. If you want to be successful, you have got to be willing to give it your everything. And that is really where we begin to separate people out. I have seen people far smarter than me, with more natural talent than me, achieve nothing compared to what I've achieved because they don't have the willingness to push through the boredom that goals demand. So again, let me restate it. You are only going to get what you absolutely demand of yourself. So you are going to have to put rules into your life. You are going to have an identity about yourself that does not allow you to give up, does not allow you to slow down or quit. And I'm talking whether you're sick or not. For years, I had hanging above my fireplace the painting of Michael Jordan in the infamous flu game, where the greatest player of all time, even though he had, I believe, 102 or 103 degree temperature, continued playing in the finals of that series. They end up winning, taking home the championship ring. It's absolutely incredible, but it never would have been if he had had the kind of goal where, well, yeah, I'm sick, so I'm not going to show up. And look, I get it. A lot of people think that I'm crazy for pushing people too hard, but I'm telling you right now, this is how you accomplish it. So if you don't want your goal, fair enough. I don't make a moral judgment on people that don't want to achieve big, aggressive goals. I completely understand. If you would rather lay back and have a stress-free life, that's a completely fine, moral, righteous way to live your life. Just be very clear about what you want. That goes back to point number one. Once you know what your goal is, that goal then makes demands. And you either live up to those demands or you don't. And the reality is that most people don't. So even when they have the clarity and they get into it and their kids wake them up in the middle of the night and then they're really tired the next day, they wake up late, they're rushing out of the door to get to work, they go, their boss is a dick to them, they come home, they're super stressed out. Through all of that, their goal suddenly becomes unimportant. And unfortunately, because life is hard and life is going to punch us in the face constantly over and over, the only way that you're going to achieve your goals is if in that moment you get more aggressive, that you have those rules in your life that are like, I am doing this every day. I know that I'm trying to read X number of books, lose X number of pounds by this date. And that means by the end of this week, I need to have lost a pound or 2 pounds. Or by the end of the month, I need to have lost 5 pounds. Whatever your goal demands, your goal ultimately will be translated into math. So it is very simple. What do you need to do on this day to achieve your goal? Do you do it or not? It really is that cut and dry. And if you're looking over your shoulder for somebody to save you, I can tell you right now, they are not coming. No one is coming to help you. This is something that you have to do for yourself. And I hope in hearing all of this, you realize why 92% of people fall into the category of I gave up. I quit. I knew what my goal was, or I didn't have enough clarity, but I didn't do the things that I needed to do in order to cross the finish line. It really is that simple. Now, the great news is it really is that simple. If you just draw those bright lines in your life, if you make those demands of yourself, if you say, I simply must do this to be the person that I want to be, and therefore I am going to do it, even when it's hard, even when it sucks, even when it's boring, I'm going to keep doing this. And let me tell you right now, even though what I'm talking about is achieving goals, I promise you one thing. If you set a goal and you achieve it, you will gain respect for yourself. And there is nothing that matters more, and I mean nothing. There is nothing that matters more than how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. So if you structure your life in a way where you set a goal that is two things, exciting and honorable. Exciting to you, you just want to do it. Other people don't have to tell you to do it. You just want to do it, right? It goes back to the whole thing. You've got to want it badly enough. And if you want it badly enough, then you're going to stick with it. And if you don't, then you won't. If it's exciting, then the second thing is that it has to be honorable. And by honorable, I simply mean that it uplifts both you and those around you. That's incredibly important because once you have that, you can give yourself over to it completely. You can build that desire in your life so that it is a raging inferno inside of you that your identity does not allow you to deviate from. The rules in your life do not allow you to deviate from. And the sheer fact of how badly you want it doesn't allow you to deviate from. But you've got to go in and put in the time and energy to build that desire. And the way that you build desire is by telling yourself that you want it, telling other people that you want it, and embodying the emotion that you want to feel in order to cement that feeling inside your mind. Because if it isn't visceral, when you're bored, when you're tired, when life is hard, when you say to yourself, I really want this goal, if you don't actually feel something positive, if you don't actually want it, you will quit. If people ever tell you that quitting isn't an answer, you need to point to them and remind them that they are a liar, because quitting is always an option. Quitting is the easiest answer. It is the answer that 92% of people take whenever they're setting a goal. If you don't want that to be you, then you've got to build desire and get a freakish amount of clarity. If you want to become a better person in 1 year, there are 2 things you're going to need to do. Change your habits and define what you mean by better person. So this goes back to the idea that the most important thing anyone can have in their life is clarity. So who is it that you're actually trying to become? The important thing is to make sure that you know what your value system is, you know what you value, then we know what you're actually striving towards. Once you have a goal, that goal makes demands. So if you're trying to be the kind of person that gets up early so that you can see your kids before you send them off to school, then you need to be the kind of person that either deals with fatigue all the time, which I think is a terrible idea and I do not recommend, or you need to be the kind of person that goes to bed early. That's one of the myriad ways that your goal is going to mandate your behavior. So whatever it is that you value, write that down. Figure out what your values are. Then we're going to build in habits that are going to help us actually become the kind of person that we want to become. So the reality is that you are a mixture of beliefs, habits, rules, and values. And once you get those things all put together, then you are doing the things that you want to do. And when you're doing the things that the person you want to be would do, you are the person you want to be. It's one of those things that it's easier said than done, but it really is that simple. So we want to map all of that out. We want to make sure that we have clarity. We want to write down what our values are. We want to write down, is there somebody that is like the kind of person you want to be, at least as you perceive them? If there is, what are the behaviors that they do that makes you feel they're the kind of person that you want to be? Are they the kind of person that goes to bed early? Are they the kind of person that gets up early? Are they the kind of person that takes their kids to school? Are they the kind of person that's striving to achieve their goals? Are they the kind of person that's driven, loving, kind, compassionate? Whatever those things are, you want to map them out into a set of behaviors. Once you have them mapped out into a set of behaviors, now we're going to begin putting routines and habits in place that are going to make sure that we're doing those things. So going down that list, if we want to get up early, we need to go to bed early. If we want to go to bed early, then we need to make sure that we have everything laid out that's going to allow us to do that. So this is something that I have worked my ass off in my own life to make sure that all I have to do on a daily basis are follow my rules and my habits. So I'll walk you through what my routine looks like on a daily basis. So first of all, I have a rule in my life based on my goals. Goals make demands. So my goal is that I'm trying to build the next Disney. To build the next Disney is going to take a Herculean effort. It's going to require us to generate a lot of revenue, to build out a lot of IP. All of that stuff then makes demands on me. So to meet the needs of what I'm trying to build, Monday through Friday, if I'm awake, I'm either working or working out. Now, because my marriage is actually my highest value, which I've mapped out, since my marriage is my highest value, on the weekends, then I'm going to spend my primary time being a husband. That's incredibly important for me to remember what my value system is. So when those two things are colliding, I know which is a priority. Now, I have 3 big priorities. You can think of number 1 is my marriage, number 2 is my purpose, which is work, and then number 3 is my family. They're in that order, and I execute against them in that way. It is not a mistake that my wife and I are building a company together. It was a way for me to integrate my wife into my purpose to make sure that when I was pursuing one, I was not pulling away from the other. So again, my goal made demands, and I'm building habits around that. So habit number 1 is that from the moment I wake up until the moment I go to bed, Monday through Friday, I'm either working or working out. So I've got all of that laid out. So right next to my bed are my workout clothes so that as soon as I wake up, I'm putting on my workout clothes. So there's not another step that's going to be required for me going and getting that workout in. More or less, the first thing that I do is I go and work out. So I get dressed, I head into the gym, I get my workout in. That way the day is not going to get carried away because I found if I had a habit of trying to work out later, that the day had a habit of getting in the way and making that very difficult. And now I was competing with being tired at the end of the day and still trying to stick with the gym. So I'm being honest with myself about what I'm like. And since I know that I'm likely to get fatigued as the day wears on, I created that habit of making sure that I got to work out first thing in the morning. Once I finish my workout, I have a whole thing around cognitive optimization. I'm not going to walk you through every detail, but I do the things that I need to do to be cognitively optimized, including meditation, fasting, and things like that. But very quickly after I'm done working out, I'm going to get to work. And I have the things that I get to work. I have another habit around that I use that I call my important things list. I want to be in the habit of knowing what I'm going to be doing next. I don't want to be in a position where I'm having to think about what I should be doing next, because when you're in that position, you're wasting time. So I spend some of my cognitive optimization time in meditation, which allows me to do something I call thinkitation, which is basically where I'm letting my mind wander across a very specific problem that I have set for myself. And then I take notes on that. Part of that note taking often is making sure that my priorities are in the right order. And then when I'm done with that, I'm just executing. I'm going down that important things list, which are listed in order that they should be executed on. That is one of the most important habits you can build into your life, is to not be afraid to prioritize, to keep that list in priority order. And so many people are afraid to say, this is number one, this is number two, and this is number three. So they start doing things like I have a 3-way tie for the number one position. That is total BS. It absolutely does not work. I'm telling you right now, you must be completely unafraid to set priorities, to say this is more important than that. Until you can do that, you are going to struggle in your life to make progress, because the reality is that you cannot do two things at one time. You may be able to very rapidly shift between different tasks, but you're always going to be doing one thing at a time. And so you want to make sure that you're doing them in the right order. That, again, is one of the most important habits that you can get to. A big part of the success that I've had is because I am hyper efficient with my time. In fact, it is very fair to say that I am obsessed with efficiency, that I am constantly looking at, am I doing things in the right order? If I do this thing, will it make thing number 2 and thing number 3 easier? That's often how I judge what should go in the number 1 position. But make sure that you are in the habit of breaking things down in priority order and then executing relentlessly against those and not allowing yourself to get distracted. This is exactly why I have that rule in my life where if I'm awake, I'm either working or working out. It creates a very bright line for me so that I know if I'm in accordance with what I should be doing or I'm not. And I'm never sitting there thinking of what I should be doing in those prime hours. Of course, at some point you have to think about it, but I save those early hours for execution. I do not want to be trying to come up with a list of things to do. I want to be just boom, right into execution mode. So that is one of the most useful things that you can begin to put in your life. After that, you need to have an hour at which you allow the outside world to begin to come into your world. So I don't take my first meeting until 8:30 a.m. I used to have it even later than that, but we've gotten into a period now at the company where there's just too many things to do. And so I have let it encroach a little bit. But having said that, I'm up usually around 3:30 to 4:30 a.m. So I have 4 to 5 hours sometimes before I have my first meeting. And most days, I actually don't take my first meeting until 9 or 10 o'clock. So I push that as late as I can. The reason that I do that and the reason that I think that this is one of the most important habits that you could put in your life if you're trying to improve yourself is because the odds of somebody other than you knowing what you should be doing with your time to achieve your custom-made goals is effectively zero. So if the first thing that you do is pick up your phone and check your email, you're saying, hey, I don't know what I should be doing with my time, so let me see what somebody else thinks I should be doing with my time. Or if you pick up your phone and you start doom scrolling right away, you're letting people take up your cognitive real estate. Using social media can be insanely powerful. I myself use it. I'm probably on social media at least an hour a day. But I have very specific moments when I allow myself to use it, and I have very specific tasks that I go on there to do, either to learn something or to broadcast something. So you want to make sure that you are being very thoughtful about once you let other people into your space, into your either your mind or onto your to-do list, that it is at that point the right moment to do that because you've already moved your most important things through. You've already got your agenda moving as fast as it can. And then you're opening yourself up to the outside feedback. Now, depending on what you're trying to do in your life, that may not be at 8:30 or 9 or 10 in the morning. That might be at 4 or 5 p.m. Now, I understand that most people, given the nature of your job, that's not going to be possible, but I just want to make sure that whatever you're trying to do, that you carve out time in the very beginning to be executing. Those are going to be your prime cognitive hours. You want to make sure that you get something done. Now, food is a huge part of this equation. It's beyond the scope of this answer to really go deeply into that. But I will say any habit that cognitively optimizes you is going to be absolutely critical. So you want to make sure that you're getting sleep. You want to make sure that you're eating healthy, and just I'll round that to whole food whenever humanly possible, and do not eat sugar. Minimize that as much as humanly possible. And then meditate, exercise, and work out. If you're doing that basket of things, you are going to be able to be at your best cognitively. Now, for whatever reason, it's become so bizarre in society where we are celebrating people that are not pushing their physical limits. And I'm just telling you right now, I don't pass any moral judgment on anybody that decides that they don't want to do that. But I will tell you 1,000% you are holding your life back. You will not be able to think clearly. You will not be able to perform efficiently. You won't even be able to be pain-free, which is going to be its own level of hell and distraction. And so while I don't think you're a better person if you work out, and I certainly don't think you're a worse person if you don't, you are certainly not going to achieve all that you could achieve if you don't make massive demands of your body. You are having a biological experience. That is simply the truth of the matter. And I know that this bothers a lot of people, but that's just the reality. You're not going to get around it. And so if you ignore the biological reality of what you eat, how you exercise, how you sleep, taking care of your mental health through meditation and eating well, which is arguably the most detrimental thing you can do to your mental health, is eat poorly. I mean that from a depression standpoint. I mean that from an anxiety standpoint. I used to have profound, debilitating anxiety. I thought it was going to be something that was happening in terms of the way I was thinking. As it turns out, it was from something I was drinking. So not alcohol, just diet energy drinks were the bane of my existence. And I had no idea until I finally stopped drinking them and realized, oh my God, that was the root of 70+% of my anxiety. And simply eliminating that from my diet had a profound impact on my performance. So be very thoughtful about habits around that. So ultimately, it boils down to defining exactly who you want to be. What are the behaviors that the person who is like who you want to be would do, and then do those things. And the way to do that is to put rules and habits in your life to make sure that you execute against those. I gave you the ones that I use in my life. The last thing I will say is that I go to bed early and I don't use an alarm. So those are the things that roughly get you there. And then I will just say, as a very oblique parting reference, that don't fail to have people in your life that you love and that love you back. There is nothing sweeter. Despite all of my intensity around goals, and I think it's so amazing, there is a reason that my marriage is my number one priority and not even my purpose and accomplishment. So be very thoughtful about who you emulate. Be very thoughtful about what you decide to make a habit, because the things you repeat really will become who you are. Once you get initially started in the pursuit of your goal of trying to improve yourself and become something more, something better, the key is consistency and follow through. Consistency and follow through. You become what you repeat. The reason that anybody successful becomes successful is because, to quote Winston Churchill, they can go from failure to failure without a loss of enthusiasm. The problem is the human animal has chosen a tactic of using culture in order to have generational progress. So a horse will come out doing all the things that a horse can do in 20 minutes, but horse culture doesn't progress because they come hardwired with everything, and they have for thousands of years, and they make no progress. Whereas humans, a generation 10,000 years ago invented the wheel, and we're all still using it now. But in taking that strategy, what ends up happening is that you really do become the thing that you repeat, the thing that you do consistently. And if you begin slacking off of that, then you don't end up making that progress. You certainly can't maintain that progress. So you have to be very, very thoughtful about what you repeat, because it is going to have a profound impact on your life. Now, the vast majority of people end up just breaking. They end up quitting. The reason that I've had the kind of success that I've had in my life is simply because I understand that iteration is how we make cultural progress. It's what I call the physics of progress. Most people, when they're running the physics of progress, when they get to the point where they have to evaluate their results, they end up lying to themselves and making it somebody else's fault. Now, the physics of progress are really simple. It's the scientific method recontextualized for whatever goal you're trying to achieve. And it goes like this. You come up with a hypothesis. If you have information that can inform that hypothesis, that is much better. But if you don't, when you're beginning, call it your best guess. You're taking your best guess as how you go from where you are to achieving your goal. There is inevitably going to be an obstacle in your way, and your best guess is about what do I need to do to overcome that obstacle to make meaningful progress towards my goal. Then you're going to turn that hypothesis into something that you can actually do. Then you're going to turn that, you're going to actually go do that thing, and then you're going to get a result from that thing. It is almost certainly going to fail to some extent, which is fine, because failure is the most information-rich data stream on planet Earth. But you have to learn from the failure. To learn from the failure, you have to be willing to admit that you made one. Most people will not admit that they made a mistake, and so they get stuck at that level. And in that moment, they say, it was the world. It's because I was born in the wrong time. My parents were dumb. The world doesn't want somebody who looks like me to succeed. Whatever excuse they use to make it somebody else's fault. Now, remember, the most terrifying thing about excuses is that they are valid. I'm not saying that those things aren't real. I'm not saying that the world isn't trying to hold some people back. I'm just saying it doesn't matter. You have to overcome it no matter what. So in the moment where you tried this thing and it didn't work, don't spend your time and energy focusing on how something else stopped you. Even though I will grant you, it's true. The world is trying to stop everybody from doing everything. It just is the reality. Accomplishing something meaningful is freakishly difficult. So don't focus on that it's more difficult for you. It just doesn't matter. You're just going to have to work harder. You either want to accomplish that thing in your life or you don't, and you're going to give up. That's the reality. The people that get what they want are the people that absolutely demand that they're going to keep going until they get that thing. So in that moment, when you're very tempted to focus on how other things have stopped you, you're not going to. What you need to do is be consistent. So in that moment, you're going to say, what could I have done differently to get a better result? And that's when the physics of progress loops. Now you come up with a more informed hypothesis. You learned your lesson. You figure out what you need to do that's going to be a little bit better than last time. You turn that into a thing that you can do. You do that thing. It will fail to some extent. You stare nakedly at your inadequacies. You figure out what you need to do to make it a little bit better. And the process begins again. That is why you have to be consistent. But the reality is that most people break. Most people cannot go from failure to failure without a loss of enthusiasm. They end up breaking. They end up thinking that either there's something wrong with them or that the world is against them. And because they don't want to deal with the pain and suffering of having to face their own inadequacies, or they give up because they just think that the world is against them, they don't make progress because you have to be able to fail a lot to learn from those failures. If I'm right, that humans as a species have chosen culture as the learning mechanism, then you have to run the loop that culture demands, which is to try something, it fails, you iterate and you get better. That works at the societal level over millennia, and it works at the individual level in an acute thing where you just have to figure out why didn't that work and keep going. But the truth is, difficulty, boredom, struggle, pain breaks almost everyone that it touches. And I will remind us all, 92% of people fail to achieve the goal they set for themselves. And the reason is that all of that difficulty just stops people because they don't have the right mindset. They don't realize that they need to fail. They don't realize that failure does not make them a failure. So you're going to have a ton of failure in your life. You have to contextualize it as the most advantageous thing that could happen to you. So when I fail, it stings, it sucks, I hate it. I want everything that I do to work the first time, and I want to make maximum progress as fast as humanly possible. But once I realize that just isn't the way that things work, and even people like Elon Musk, who I think are abnormally intelligent, they realize, oh, I have to fail a lot. I have to try things and see what works and what didn't. There is no way around being in the messy middle. There's no way to think or hypothesize your way to what's going to work the best. You have to get in there and try things. Even somebody that's thinking philosophically has to be able to get in there and battle their ideas and take their ideas out to other people. Even Einstein went out and made sure that his ideas were battle tested, not only through experimental physicists, but also just his friends that were other people that were able to beat up his ideas and poke holes in them. And if you're not willing to put your ideas to the test, if you're not willing to try things and see what fails, then you will forever be stuck thinking and not making any progress. You really want to be a doing machine, somebody that's out there trying. But that means that you have to risk embarrassment. And embarrassment is one of the things that destroys so many goals because people don't want to admit that they were struggling. People don't want to admit that they were having a hard time. And so they either don't tell people about the goal, which is a huge mistake. You want to tell as many people as you can. It's part of the process of building desire. You want to tell people, I'm going to do this thing and it really matters to me and I'm going to accomplish it by this date. Now all eyes are on you. But that's one of the ways you're going to stick to what you're doing. And if the whole point is that you have to repeat, be resilient, be gritty, stick with it, try, fail, over and over and over as you get better at overcoming those obstacles, then you have to be willing to push through all of that difficulty, to know why you're doing the things you're doing, and to understand that that's just the process. So guys, I'm telling you, if you really want to achieve something absolutely powerful in your life, you've got to be persistent. If you haven't already, be sure to read the book Grit by Angela Duckworth. It's an amazing expose on how to be gritty if you're not already. The process that I use for achieving my goals is really simple. First and foremost, you want to make sure that you cognitively optimize. I cannot stress that enough. So much of my life is about doing things to make sure that my brain is working well. They look like this. Number one, get sleep. Do not use an alarm. Most people set an alarm. Stop. I built 3 multi-million-dollar companies, one of those being a billion-dollar company, all without setting an alarm. Do I occasionally set an emergency alarm for something like a 4 a.m. flight? Yes. But for the most part, I don't use an alarm. I'm talking like 99% of my days, I do not set an alarm. I want to make sure that I get all of the sleep that my body needs. Why? Because I'm able to be more efficient. People mistake grinding around the clock and becoming less efficient because they're tired with actually getting more done. What you want to do is make sure that you have a very high output of achievement per waking hour. So I check in with myself about every 3 hours to make sure that I'm being productive. If you're not being productive, nothing else matters. So go to bed early. I go to bed at 9 p.m. I don't use an alarm. I typically sleep 6 to 7 hours. That's changed. If you've heard other content where I say 5 to 6 hours, right now I'm in a cycle where I'm sleeping closer to my average is probably just under 7 hours. So I never know what that's going to be. It tends to be regulated by the amount of stress in my life. So I'm getting roughly 7 hours of sleep. So that means that if I go to bed at 9 p.m., I'm up at 4 a.m. I have a rule in my life that if I'm awake Monday through Friday, I'm either working or working out. I give myself only 10 minutes to get out of bed. Why? Because I struggle to get out of bed. Just is a thing. It's always been a thing for me. From the time I was a kid, my dad would have to drag me out of bed in the morning to there was a period in my early to mid 20s where I was laying in bed 4 to 5 hours a day and just could not bear to get out of bed. It's absolutely ridiculous. Even I am completely scandalized by the reality that to this day, despite all of the things that I've accomplished, I have to fight myself just to get out of bed. So that's a reality. I accept that. So I gave myself a rule that I had to be out of bed in 10 minutes or less. Right next to my bed, I keep headphones. So I put my headphones on. I begin researching the second I wake up. So I'm researching. Technically, this gets into a long thing. Right now, I'm in a phase where I actually read while I sleep. Long story. I don't think you get things subliminally. That's not that, but I do find that it helps me stay asleep. I don't necessarily recommend that for everybody, but just by way of being completely transparent in terms of what my routine looks like for achieving my goals. From the second I wake up, I am researching something that matters to me. I immediately put on my gym clothes. I head to the gym right away. I work out. I then meditate. After I meditate, I do something I call thinkitating. The reason that I do these two things, one, meditation is a good way to get your stress and your anxiety down to zero. The reason you want to do this is cognitive optimization. If you are feeling frantic, if you are constantly in fight or flight, your brain is not going to function as well as it could. What is happening when you go into fight or flight is the blood is literally leaving your prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the seat of higher level cognition. It's where you future plan. It's where you maintain your discipline. And so when you're in that fight or flight stage, you don't have the blood in the prefrontal cortex in the way that you need to, which is why people end up cheating on their diet. It's why they end up not sticking with their goals and persevering. So you want to make sure that you're taking the time to meditate, to lower your stress, lower your anxiety. And then there's a hidden benefit to meditation, which is why I follow that sort of almost seamlessly into thinkitation, which is where I stay in that meditative posture. I keep my meditative breathing going. I'm staying in that cognitive space because when you are meditating, if you're just coming back to the breath, very simple practice. My meditation practice is dead simple. It's literally what I call just breathe. So as my mind wanders, I remind myself to come back to the breath, to just breathe. My mind wanders again, back to the breath, wanders, back to the breath, wanders, back to the breath. It's tragic how rapidly my brain begins to wander, but I just keep bringing it back. Now, when I do that enough, I get into a calm and creative state. When I'm in a calm and creative state, unique areas of my brain begin to talk to each other. And so I will come up with very interesting solutions to problems that I won't get when I'm not in that state. So this is why people will often say, I need to sleep on that problem, because your brain goes through that cycle that's very much like a meditative state as you're falling asleep and then waking up again. You pass through a very similar state. So I will call that calm and creative. So once I'm in that calm and creative state, now I begin to get these, I give myself a problem to solve before I sit down to meditate. So I know what I'm working on. It's tied to my important things, which we'll get to in a minute. But I sit there and I know what the problem is going to be that I'm going to start working on when I'm in that calm and creative state. And then I'll allow myself to take notes as interesting ideas come up. I'm going to journal on that, which I would not do during the meditative part where I'm just coming back to the breath, back to the breath, back to the breath. And I do that for as long as I need to get to zero stress, zero anxiety, calm, creative. Once I'm there, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 45 minutes if I'm really stressed out. But once I'm there, then I move over into thinkitation and I begin noodling on those hard problems. Once I finish that, then I'm going to go into my important things. Now, how do I know when to stop thinkitating and move on to important things? I have found that at some point I begin running out of really fruitful, novel ideas. And once I feel like I'm kind of trying to force it, then I'm like, all right, let's just now move into executing on my important things. So now that I'm in my important things, which is a list that I keep constantly maintained, so I know what the top things are that I should be working on, so I'm not spending that time thinking about what I should be doing, I just go straight into execution mode. So then I start going down the list, doing them in order. Now, the way to execute on something is very much in order. So first thing, you're going to do everything on that thing that you can do until you've pushed it as far as you can go. And now you're waiting on other people. And then you're going to move on to the next thing. You're going to do everything that you can on that until you're waiting on other people. And then you're going to push it off, so on and so forth, down your list. Now, my important things list is predicated on my goals. So the very important thing to understand about the nature of goals is that they make demands. If you want to win a championship in swimming, then you need to do the things that a swimmer trying to win a gold medal by a certain date would need to do. It's going to dictate how you eat, how you sleep, how you train, who you talk to, how you think, all of that stuff. And so you have to, one, get good at identifying what your goals demand. And then two, you have to be good at actually sticking to the things your goals demand, which this is where most people fall down because it gets boring, it gets difficult. So you've got to be able to push through. All right, so I work my way down my important things list. Once I finish doing that, then because I'm the CEO of a company, at that point, then I'm going to begin to engage with my team. I'm usually working for about 4 to 5 hours on the things that I know that I should be doing to have the highest, most efficient impact on the company. And then, because I know a big part of my job is orchestrating people, making sure that they're focused on the things that they should be, answering questions and the like, then I go and I engage with the company. And then I take meetings based on what's important and how time aligns. It just is what it is. I take meetings until 6 p.m. I try to cut off. There's one meeting that I have a week because we're dealing with a company in China that goes until 7:30. At 7:30, It's only one day a week that I do that. Most of the time, my last meeting ends at 6. And then for the rest of the time, for the next 3 hours, I go back into my mode of controlling my time, making sure that I'm working on things that I need to do, including making sure that my important things list is up to date and that I'm working on all the loose ends for the day to make sure that everybody has what they need to start the next day, all that good stuff, which gives me the ability in the morning to take advantage of my peak cognitive ability. Now, one of the reasons that I've ended up structuring my day like that is because I found that in the morning, I'm super sharp. I've got these creative ideas. I'm able to really make progress, create space for myself. Whereas in the evenings, I'm a little bit slower. I'm not quite as efficient as I am early in the day. And so it remains easy for me to be reactive, but it's much harder for me to be proactive. That's just me. Maybe you're the complete opposite. Structure your day around you. So in the evenings, I can remain very useful as I respond to people's questions and things like that, as I comb over my important things list. All of those things I find much easier to do in the evenings. And then the last hour before I go to bed, whenever I can, and this unfortunately breaks apart sometimes, but whenever I can, I want that last hour to be work, but to be something I'm really excited about. Now, you want to be very thoughtful about how you structure your life because you should love what you're working on. Now, I know that that can be very difficult as somebody who has at periods in my life absolutely hated my job. I completely understand, but you want to push yourself to get to the point where you at least have a part of your job that you absolutely love. So that's how I spend that last hour of my day, is only working on, when I can, something that I'm really excited about. And that helps combat fatigue, and it also helps me get ready for bed, because you don't want to be dealing with something super stressful as you're getting ready for bed. And another thing that I do just by way of sleep hygiene is that I make sure that I am not getting blue light into my eyes towards the evenings. I think that's very important. So starting 3 hours before I go to bed, I'm wearing blue blocking glasses. My computer is set to go into night mode. So at sunrise, the blue light comes back on, and at sunset, the blue light turns off. I think that kind of thing can be very advantageous. As for my diet, which is another key part of cognitively optimizing, I do intermittent fasting 7 days a week, 365 days a year, including Christmas Day. And I do that because it makes me feel better. So it's not even for vanity or to be cool. It's just I feel better when I do that. So I track this for about 18 months every day. And it averaged 17 hours, including weekends, holidays, and all that. So there are, of course, times where that window is more narrow, but the least I knowingly go to is 14 hours. So that's the least amount of time that I'll go between my last meal and my first meal the next day. Like I said, even on a Christmas day or something like that, I'm going to have at least a 14-hour window. Again, just to protect my stomach and make sure that I feel great. And that will, on the weekdays, mean that I'll go sometimes 18, 19, sometimes 20 hours without a meal before I eat. And I eat my last meal at about 2 p.m., sometimes a little before, sometimes a little after, but that's roughly there. And then I don't have my next meal till 8, 9, sometimes 10, 11 o'clock. So that is my process. And I think that there's a lot of things that virtually everybody could use from that to build a very effective process. You can reboot your life, your health, even your career, anything you want. All you need is discipline. I can teach you the tactics that I learned while growing a billion-dollar business that will allow you to see your goals through. Whether you want better health, stronger relationships, a more successful career, any of that is possible with the mindset and business programs in Impact Theory University. Join the thousands of students who have already accomplished amazing things. Tap now for a free trial and get started today. If you want to really make progress in your life, one of the keys is going to be to track that process. Now, the way to think about getting better is you want to get incrementally better. The problem is if you're trying to get incrementally better, you're basically going to stand still. So you want to be asking the famous question that Peter Thiel asked, which is, how do I make my 10-year plan happen in the next 6 months? When you start thinking like that, it really does shift your thinking into having a radically different approach. I think one of the big problems that people have when they're trying to make progress is they set a goal that's quote unquote realistic. And when it's realistic, it's not very exciting. I teach a whole class on the process of setting goals. And one of the things that I tell people is you have to set goals that are exciting. There's a whole bunch of research on this that shows the people that are most likely to stick with their goals are the people that set a goal that is truly exciting to them. The goals that are going to be exciting are going to be big goals. That's just the way the human mind is wired. I'm telling you right now, there is an evolutionary imperative that has been embedded in your brain, and there's no way around it, that demands that you do hard things. I think from an evolutionary perspective, that makes sense because staying alive was hard. And if we didn't get an intrinsic emotional reward from doing hard things, we would have died out. So we are all the ancestors of people that got off a little bit on doing hard things. So when you don't do hard things, you don't get that positive feedback loop. You feel a sense of dis-ease. And so many people have that sense of unease, and they think that I need to go retire and my life needs to be more relaxed. I need to be on a beach somewhere. This all sucks. It's not true at all. I'm telling you right now, the thing that you need to do is find meaning and purpose and go after it. Go after it in a big way. Set yourself a crazy goal that you really believe in, that you really think life would be better if I do this thing, if I achieve this. And even if I fail, man, I would have spent my life well trying to contribute to that. If you build your life around that and go all out, man, trying to make something that you really believe in come true, to bend the world to your will, to close your eyes and imagine a world that is better than this one, open your eyes and then execute to make that world come true, you will love your life. That's the key, to find something that you really believe in and then go all out after it. Now, to track all of this progress, you really do want to be journaling, writing things down, checking things off. How many days did you stick to what you said you were going to do? This can be such an amazing way to gamify your own life. Is it just have a calendar, digital or physical? Go through and mark off the day. Did you do what you said you were going to do? Yes or no? And then tally up for the week, for the month, for the year. What percentage of days did I do what I said I was going to do? Now, in this moment, you can lie. 100% you can lie. But if you lie, when you look at that calendar, you're not going to feel the way you want to feel. You're going to feel like a liar. You're going to know that you're a fraud. The whole idea is to feel a certain way when you look at that calendar, to be like, I did the thing that I said I was going to do, and I feel really awesome about that. So it is truly one of those things. The only person that you're going to cheat if you're lying about this is yourself. So come up with whatever way you can to track this stuff, whether it's a spreadsheet, whether it's checking things off in a calendar. If I'm completely honest about what I do, I check in with myself every 3 hours. I don't keep a written tally. But I do reward myself emotionally whenever I do the thing I said I was going to do. So the first one for me is, did I get out of bed in 10 minutes or less? If I did, I get to feel good about myself. If I didn't, two things happen. One, I don't get to feel good about myself, and I give myself that jab in the ribs of, you said you were going to do it and you did not do it. And then number two, I will confess to my wife or here to the community out there that I didn't do that day. I didn't meet my goal. And so by checking in with myself in real time, I'm able to see. The other is, when you're setting goals, it is absolutely critical that all of your goals have a metric associated with them so that you know the exact metric that you want to hit, so you know if you're making progress. So often when people get into the physics of progress, they didn't set a metric by which they're going to judge their goal, so they don't actually know if they're making progress. You want your goals to be specific. You want your goals to have metrics. The reason that I emphasize that so much is most people avoid metrics, they avoid dates, they avoid those specifics because then they and others will know if they're actually making progress. If you don't want the specifics, it means you're not actually interested in the actual progress. You're interested in the fiction of feeling better about yourself by saying that you have this really cool goal. And so one of the things that I'm constantly checking with myself is, did I live up to the rhetoric, meaning, oh, I'm telling people I want to do this cool thing? Or did I actually show up and play to win? Did I leave it all out on the field? So do not think that rhetoric is actual achievement. Talking about something is nothing. Did you actually make progress? And to be honest, even trying, even though I actually do think, and this is complex, but I actually do think you should emotionally reward yourself only for the sincere pursuit. But when you're thinking about tracking progress, you need to be naked and raw about whether you're actually making progress. Now, the reason it's so important to do that is if you're not making progress, you need to adjust. This goes back to the physics of progress. You're staring nakedly at your inadequacies. You're asking, what could I have done differently to get a better result? And if in that moment you don't have a metric to judge yourself against, you don't know how to better inform your next hypothesis. So the goal of trying something is to learn something that gives you a better thing to do. And when you do that, you make more meaningful progress. And when you don't make that meaningful progress, you need to understand why. But it really does come down to what gets measured gets improved. What gets measured gets improved. If you don't have the measurement, you won't know whether you're making progress. You won't have the emotional sting that you need to force yourself to actually dig in and figure this out. So gamify and make sure that you have metrics. You do those two things and you will make massive progress. If you want to know if you're setting the bar too high or too low when it comes to goal setting, I will just tell you this right now. You're setting the bar too low. Everybody's setting the bar too low. If you think about the crazy things that people have accomplished, whether it's in, I think it's 64 years or something, we went from the Wright brothers flying a plane for the first time to landing on the moon. 64 years. That's an impossibly small amount of time to think that somebody would have been alive at the time. Like you could have been 20 at the time the Wright brothers flown and said, we're going to go to the moon by the time I'm 85, and been right. But imagine how many people would have told you that you were out of your mind. There is so much literature on this. It's just beyond reproach. The people that set the most aggressive goals are the ones that end up achieving their goals. Now, the reason is, because there is complexity here, the reason is that it gets you excited enough to go out and pursue this thing, to be able to attract other people to your goal. That's a huge thing that you're going to learn. If you have a goal that's really exciting, and when people think about getting meaning and purpose in their life, and they think about, oh my God, I could be a part of a team that takes us to the moon, or I could be a part of a team that terraforms Mars, or I could be a part of a team that ends world hunger or deals with climate change. Whatever the thing is, it gets you excited. When it is a gigantic goal, it actually motivates people. Now, you also, the people that achieve their goals, have a path to getting there. So it can't be a pipe dream. You have to actually know how you're going to march towards that thing. And if it's a business, you need to know how you're going to generate revenue all along the way. It is incredibly difficult, but you do want to make sure that you're setting a bar that is within the realm of physics. You don't want to be throwing something so far into the trees that it is literally impossible. If you have to invalidate the laws of physics, I will tell you that that's not very interesting. And then one thing that you want to also think through is it something that you could achieve in your lifetime? And if it's not something you could achieve in your lifetime, are you okay being somebody that's going to lay a brick towards building that thing? And there's that old adage that you want to plant trees under whose shade you will never sit. So there is very many honorable things that people could do that they're not going to reap the ultimate benefits of, that they understand that they're only going to be one brick in that wall. Think about all the people that have given their entire professional careers to solving cancer, which remains unsolved. Countless amazing, brilliant minds have given themselves over to that completely, knowing all they're going to do is lay one brick in what will ultimately be the building that is that solution. But be honest, think about that, but make sure that you have a path to get there. That's the key. It's got to be exciting and you've got to see a path. But you want to make sure that you're really going after something that's going to inspire you for the long run. Because remember, the reason that most people quit is because they are broken by how boring and difficult things get. So when you ask yourself, in the grips of that difficulty, that suffering that comes along with pursuing a goal you actually care about, you are going to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And if the answer isn't compelling, you're going to quit. So make sure that you come up with a goal that's big enough that when you ask why, you know exactly why, and you'll keep pushing. It's inevitable when you're pursuing your goals that you're going to find yourself in a rut and you are not going to want to stick to what you're doing. The most important thing is to identify, is this a pattern in your life? So many people love the beginning of something. They love that excitement, that initial fascination when everything is new and it just feels limitless and everything feels possible. They haven't gotten that first punch in the mouth that comes with really trying to get good at something and accomplish something when life is going to get complex. It's going to get in your way. You're going to fail. You're going to embarrass yourself, all that stuff. So in that moment, you've got to make sure that you are going to push yourself through that, get out, and get to the other side. It is inevitable that in your pursuit of a goal that you care about, you are going to end up getting in a rut. In that moment, most people give up. I'm going to tell you what you need to do if you want to be part of the 8% that actually sees their goals through. You need to fall back on process. So many people want to fall back on motivation, but the reality is that motivation is not going to be there for you just the vast majority of the time. The vast majority of the time, you're going to be bored, things are going to be hard, you're going to be tired, it's going to be complex. And in that moment, you just need to run a process. You need to have habits that you can rely on to get you through. I've talked about them before, but just to recap, you want to make sure that you're cognitively optimizing. You want to make sure that you have your important things list. You want to make sure that you're doing things in order. You want to make sure that you have rules in your life that you stick to. You want to be leveraging your identity, that you're the kind of person that sticks with things. And then you want to have habits and routines that you're just going to loop around day after day after day that you know are moving you towards your goal. To get to your goal, it really is about persistence, consistency, metrics, so you know whether or not you're making progress, and then just running the physics of progress over and over and over. You have a hypothesis about how you're going to overcome the obstacle that stands between you and what you're trying to accomplish. You're going to do something to accomplish that thing, and you're going to see how much progress you made, which is going to give you more information for you to reformulate that hypothesis. If you fall back on that process, that is going to be the thing that carries you through. Never count on motivation, because motivation really does come and go. So make sure that you have an airtight process, and then everything else will fall into line. When it comes to self-talk, there's something that's really important to remember. You become what you repeat. So people that are high achievers, they do not allow themselves to repeat anything that diminishes their sense of self, that diminishes their will to push forward, that diminishes their sense of, I can improve at this thing over time. So high achievers are putting themselves in an optimistic state. The reason they need to be in an optimistic state is because, going back to the first answer, mindset is everything. If you believe that by putting energy and effort into trying to achieve your goals, you can actually achieve your goals, you will keep pushing forward. If you believe that no matter what you do, you are going to fail, why would you keep trying? You wouldn't. And this is why so many people throw their hands up and they give up, because they don't believe that by going after their goals that they're actually going to make it. So a high achiever is somebody that no matter what they encounter, no matter how many difficulties they run into, they're going to say things like, there is a solution to this problem. They're going to say things like, I can get better at this. They're going to say things like, I may not be good enough yet, but I can get good enough. They say things like, with enough time and energy, I can 100x my abilities in anything. They say things like one of my favorite phrases, on a long enough timeline, I can beat anyone at anything. Now, secretly, that one isn't 100% true, but it's the kind of phrase that, even though I know at the edges that it isn't true, so many people give up along the way that if I just keep going and keep stacking skills and keep getting better, I know that I can beat the vast majority of humanity at virtually anything, which is exactly how I've been able to have the success that I've had. I am not smarter than the average person, but man, I am way harder to break than the average person. I am way more consistent than the average person. I am constantly reminding myself, I can get better, but it takes a massive amount of time and energy. And that's another thing I remind myself. Everything is moving towards chaos at all times. People are trying to stop me actively. The world is unintentionally trying to stop me. The world is complex. Humans are difficult. Humans are complex. Life is confusing. Life is chaotic. And it takes a tremendous amount of energy. But another thing that high achievers tell themselves, if I focus on what I could do differently, if I hold on to the fact that my life is an exact reflection of my choices. Let that one sink in. My life is an exact reflection of my choices. If when I was born, I look like my parents, when I die, I look like my choices. I cannot remember who I first heard say that, but man, that one gives me the chills. When we're born, we look like our parents. When we die, we look like our choices. Woo, that one's sexy, I'm not gonna lie. So if you stay focused on that, as high achievers do,
then you begin going, okay, there is something that I could do here to level up my skill set that would allow me to do something different, that would allow me to get a different outcome. And that's the goal. If you retain control, if you don't say, oh, this is society's problem, this is that person that tried to stop me's problem, what could I do differently? This is my problem to solve. What could I do differently to get a different outcome? If you stay focused on that, you will for sure be able to achieve more than somebody who doesn't. Now, the key is that you become what you repeat. So be very thoughtful, not only to tell yourself all of those things, but you want to make sure that you pattern interrupt if you're telling yourself something negative. So many people that get stuck, again, psychological immune system will come to your aid. So if you're repeating to yourself, I'm dumb, I'm stupid, I'm not good enough at that, I don't have enough talent, I don't come from the right background, all of that, then your psychological immune system is going to want to soothe your ego around that. And so you're going to find a way to make those things somebody else's fault. And you're going to start moving yourself into the zone of not trying, giving up, coasting, going easy, doing what I used to do, which is put myself in smaller and smaller rooms with people that were at my level of intellect or lower, rather than people that really pushed me to get better. So if you're saying negative things like that, if you're developing a negative worldview like that, you need to pattern interrupt that. There's an amazing book called Feeling Great by David D. Burns. Read that book. It talks about cognitive behavioral therapy and the way that you can use pattern interrupts to stop yourself from repeating things that are self-destructive and to get yourself out of cognitive illusions. So you want to be very careful, and to help you get out of cognitive distortions. You want to make sure that you're not looking at the world through a distorted lens of your own creation. Okay, that is how you leverage the things that you repeat to get ahead and stop yourself from repeating things that are going to hold you back. My journey to developing a growth mindset was a very long journey. I had a fixed mindset for my entire life until I was about 25. Now look, there were shades in there where I was beginning to grasp that something was going on. But my journey went like this. As a kid, I believed that my talent and intelligence were fixed traits. I did not believe that I could improve them. And so I thought, okay, like I'm, average-ish. And I knew that I was more verbal than most people. And so I certainly tried to leverage that to my benefit. But as I got older, I started encountering people that were better, faster, stronger, smarter than me. And it really began to damage my sense of self. Now, when I was 15, around there, I was introduced to the Tao Te Ching. And thankfully, before that, I had seen the movie The Empire Strikes Back, which introduced me to Yoda. And I thought Yoda was amazing. I loved the way that he talked. And later in life, I would realize just how real his advice was. And the Tao Te Ching sounded so much like Yoda that I was immediately drawn to it. And I was like, oh my God, this is so incredible. And I realize now, looking back, that the Tao Te Ching was really what planted the idea of a growth mindset, because it talks about the cognitive distortions that we get into, the mental illusions that we all live under, and how what I now call frame of reference, that we're all looking at the world through a really warped mirror. And by looking at the world through a warped mirror, we see a warped version of reality, and that can either hold us back or it can propel us forward. Now, I had a frame of reference that was holding me back because I had a fixed mindset. I did not recognize that the human animal as a species chose adaptation as our primary strategy of advancement. So we're born helpless, but over time we're able to drink very deeply from culture. Knowledge stacks. And so now somebody born today doesn't have to relearn the printing press. Printing presses just exist. And so you take all of human knowledge and we're able to live on the top of that and just keep building things moving forward. It's incredibly extraordinary what the human animal has been able to accomplish by choosing the strategy of adaptation so that we can learn from people. We don't come pre-hardwired with everything. We learn as we go. And that means that we can take advantage of all the things that have come before us. So it's really, really exceptional. But I did not have that frame of reference. And therefore, I did not realize that, oh, just because I suck at these things doesn't mean that I can't go and get good at them. And so what I was doing, despite that I had these early seeds planted in my mind around these cognitive illusions and distortions,
I was really afraid that I was not going to be able to get good enough at the things I needed to be good at in order to make my dreams come true. So I've always been very ambitious, but I was also terrified that I wasn't going to be able to achieve the things I wanted to achieve. And so that was really devastating for me. And so as I got older and life slapped me around and I met people that were better than me at things that I really wanted to be great at, it really started to make me feel badly about myself. And so to avoid feeling badly about myself, I started putting myself in smaller and smaller to achieve. One, I wasn't around the kind of people that would be able to help me. Two, I wasn't around people that were pushing me could get better, so that didn't seem worthwhile. And then three, because I wasn't around people that were pushing me and I wasn't in an environment that was helping me grow, I wasn't growing and therefore wasn't able to actually make progress towards my goals. And so I was doing things that made me feel better about myself, and it actually did work. That's the sinister part about all of this. By putting myself in rooms with people that were less ambitious than me, people that were, if I'm the average person, people that weren't as smart as me, that made me feel awesome. And so the reality is I was feeling good as I was moving farther and farther away from my goals. So thankfully, my ambition continued to propel me to rethink what I was doing. So, imagine me now, I'm sort of 21, 22, and I'm starting to think, I've graduated from college. I'm not at all moving towards my goals. I'm not quite sure what to make of this. And I was like, how do I really go and get what I want out of life? And I realized I'm profoundly lazy. I'm not even trying to take the steps that I would need. So, hey, let me start putting myself out there. Because I was highly verbal, I put myself into situations where my verbal ability would shine. That began to open doors for me. And then I started getting in rooms of entrepreneurial rooms is probably the right way to think about it, just as an employee, but in an entrepreneurial environment. And I realized that being in that environment was really making me feel badly about myself because the people around me were so much smarter than me, meaning that they were able to process raw data faster than me. Like even all these years later, now that I don't struggle with that sense of inferiority, I still recognize that some people can just process data faster than others. So I know that's one of the things that I have to work around. I need to optimize for that. Know thyself, right? I still have a growth mindset. I know I can 100x myself in any area, but understanding where you are, what things are harder for you, easier for you is useful. So at the time though, I was looking at the world through this distorted mirror of not yet fully realizing how much better I could get, but having Yoda's words in my head, having the Tao Te Ching's words and echoing in my head, realizing maybe I can get better if I push myself, but I'm in this environment, I'm really not feeling good about who I am. And so I had this moment of crisis. And what ended up happening was I knew that that entrepreneurial environment was the thing that was going to move me towards my goal of getting wealthy. But I finally could articulate in words that I had actually been optimizing my life for feeling smart. And so there was the moment of crisis became very acute when I was arguing for an idea in the entrepreneurial environment. I was arguing for an idea because it was mine, even though I knew it was bad for the business. And because I was aware both of the fact that, whoa, this idea that I'm really arguing for is terrible for the business, and that I really wanted to win. And I really wanted them to implement this idea. And I was like, why am I doing that? I'm like, okay, because it's my idea. Why do I care about it being my idea? Because I want to feel smart. Why would winning this make me feel smart? Because they would have done the thing that I presented. I would have convinced them to do my thing. And if I could convince them of that, that means that I'm smarter than they are, or at least that they are giving me the accolade by following my idea that gives me the feedback loop that I'm smarter than they are, that they think I'm smarter. And so I'm sitting there going, none of this really makes sense. And so I'm like, what do I actually want? And so for the first time in my life, and this ended up being a line in the sand, it's the only thing in my life that I can say is a line in the sand, that before this realization, my life was one way, and after this realization, I had a growth mindset, and my life was a different way. And the realization was that I was building my self-esteem around being right, and that if I continued to build my self-esteem around being right, I was gonna have to leave that company and go somewhere else where I was around people that weren't as smart as me so I could feel good about myself and that I would be right more often. And I thought, wow, that's weird. So which goal do I care more about? Do I care about getting wealthy or do I care about feeling smart? And I realized that I cared more about achieving my goals. Let's say that, because I don't chase money anymore. So I cared more about my goals. Okay, if I care more about my goals and I know that I'm not good enough yet to get where I want to go, then I'm going to have to really embrace, unfortunately, Carol Dweck had not written her book, Mindset, that defined a growth mindset. So I didn't have that word, but a path of self-improvement. I'm going to go down this path of self-improvement aggressively. Now, to do that, I need to feel good about myself. I realized pretty quickly that I couldn't just go, okay, I'm going to be fine coming in here and feeling like a moron every day. I knew that wasn't going to work because I built my self-esteem around being smart. So I was like, okay, well, if I am going to come in and do things that aren't as good as they're going to need to be, and I'm going to embarrass myself and not only look stupid, but actually be stupid, meaning uneducated in an area that I need to become educated. And that since being willing to make those mistakes and looking stupid is a necessary part of expedient growth, what can I do with my self-esteem that will allow me to really propel myself forward? And the answer was I could begin building my self-esteem, not around being right, but around identifying the right answer. I could build my self-esteem around being the learner. And by building my self-esteem around being the learner, now I could fail. Now I could embarrass myself. Now I could stare nakedly at my inadequacies, and I would actually feel better about myself because I was building my ego, my self-esteem, my sense of self around being willing to admit when I was wrong, being willing to admit that I had made a mistake, being willing to admit that I wasn't good enough yet, but that I could get better. But I had to lower my defenses. I had to stop using the psychological immune system to make it somebody else's fault. I had to take responsibility for my choices. I had to take responsibility for my skill set. I had to take responsibility for my energy and effort, and I had to get better. And by doing that and taking a longer view of my life and saying, okay, this is going to take time. I'm going to have to embarrass myself a lot, but I really am going to get better. I started to have success. So it was a very emotionally volatile journey that I went on that required that moment of absolute crisis of having the two conflicting values in my life being brought to bear in one moment where I realized that I was in one way moving away from my goal of being successful, and in another way moving towards my goal of feeling smart. And I was like, whoa, wow, that's really dumb. That doesn't make any sense. And by not judging myself in that moment, and I was just like, I was so devastated emotionally that I was like, emotional rock bottom. So I said, no judgment. Whatever the answer is, the answer is. Just be honest with yourself. Do you want to be successful? Or do you want to be right? And I realized that I would rather be successful. And that forced me to pursue a path of self-development. And so from that moment forward, I've never looked back. And it's just been all growth mindset all the time. The most harmful self-talk that anyone can ever use, and it will hold them back forever, is this isn't my fault. If I could say the most controversial thing I've ever said, the thing that has generated more anger towards me, and I was so shocked by this, everything is your fault. Yes, I know that is a word that triggers people. I say that so that if you can face yourself and say everything is my fault, then I know that you're not going to stop partway to taking responsibility for the choices in your life. And look, of course I know that not everything is your fault. And if you were hit by a drunk driver, that's not your fault. But I would tell myself that that is my fault. The reason is I want to remind myself that I can keep my power, that I could have made a different choice. I didn't have to get in the car, right? Of course, I don't control that they drink. And I am not in any way, shape, or form interested in somebody who has been the victim of anything in their life to feel badly about having been victimized. I'm just saying, don't let yourself take on the identity of the victim even when you are victimized, because it puts you in a defensive posture. I want to be on the offensive. I want to go after things in my life. I don't ever want somebody or something to hold me back. And the easiest way to let someone or something hold you back is to take on the identity of the victim. So please don't get lost in that idea. I get it. Somebody's had horrible things happen to them. I don't want them to feel badly either. I don't want anyone to feel badly about things that have happened to them. I want them to maintain their emotional sovereignty, to not let a terrible thing define them, to instead remember at any time, you can metaphorically take up arms. You can grab your sword. You can go fight. You can get better at things. You can elevate yourself. People cannot stop you if you get good enough. But if you are constantly like, I'm in this position because of something that happened to me, because of things outside of my control, your life won't become what you and I want your life to become. I don't say this for my own sake. This is something I've already realized in my life. If I take responsibility for everything, there's virtually nothing I can't accomplish. I already know that. My success is evidence in my life of the reality of that fact. But I worry about a lot of other people that unfortunately have ended up with a frame of reference that makes them feel like things are out of their control. And even though, yes, I know there are things that are out of your control, there's nothing I can do to stop the sun from rising tomorrow. But I would never allow myself to feel helpless. So the example that I always give people is imagine that we discover tomorrow that an asteroid is streaking towards Earth. Collision course, guaranteed. This is a extinction level event. In that moment, I'm not gonna say, oh, this isn't my fault. I'm gonna say this is my fault. Now, how do I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's my fault? Because there is a group right now that tracks what are called near-Earth objects. I know they exist, but I've never given them a dime of my money. I've never sent them an email with encouraging words or ideas on ways that they could do that better or that they could be more prepared if something were coming towards us. And I could do that. And even though I'm telling you this story right now, I'm still not going to do that because I don't think that's the highest use of my time. But I wouldn't fool myself into thinking that there was nothing that I could have done differently that might have had an impact. Now, the reason that I live my life that way, even though that you and I both know that if an asteroid is coming, like, especially at the last minute, like, am I really the person that's going to be contributing to that? Probably not. But I'm glad that there are people in the world that look at astronomically large problems and don't say, oh, there's nothing I can do. They start going, no bullshit, what would it take? What would we have to do in order to have a positive outcome here? It is very easy in life to throw up your hands and say, man, this is just out of my control. And there are so many things that are so overwhelming that I get why people say, okay, that's not going to be the thing that I'm going to put my energy into. I'm going to put my energy over here. But the key difference is when you do that, please don't trick yourself into thinking there's nothing that you could do. It may not be where you want to spend your time, and it may be a drop in the ocean of what actually needs to be done. But if you feel like there's really no way that I could contribute, that becomes the frame of reference through which you view your life. And even though it's probably a little bit like screaming into the void to think that I can stop an asteroid from smashing into the Earth, look at all the things that we've done as a species. And at some point, the moon landing, it's become so cliche, but really think about that. How hard would that be to leave the Earth? It's crazy to land on the moon and then come back safely. It's insane. And that required somebody to go, no, we can figure that out. And that is all that separates people that go on to be very successful from people that get stuck, is when people that go on to be successful hit what seems like an insurmountable obstacle. They say to themselves, there's a solution here. There is a solution here. I may not know it yet. I may not be the person that is capable of solving that problem yet, but there is a solution. And when you stay in a solution-oriented mindset, now you really have a chance of doing something because you have that frame of reference that is like the only belief that matters, which is that, oh, this problem is solvable. That means that if I put in the time and energy to solve this problem, I may actually make progress. And that is exactly what you need in order to get momentum going in your life. So please, I'm begging you, even though I get it, and I don't ever want somebody to feel badly about themselves because something bad happened to them. I also don't want people to give up their power. Remember, you can always do something different to get a different outcome. You can always get better at something, and there really is always a solution. One of the most hotly debated things when I was growing up was, is brain plasticity really real? Can you actually rewire your brain? Or said the way that it was said when I was growing up, can you teach an old dog new tricks? Now, here's the great news. This answer has been put to bed. It is 100% true. You can actually see video footage of it happening. You can rewire your brain at any age. So you're 98 and you're on your deathbed. You can still rewire your brain. Now, of course, you can rewire your brain a lot easier when you're a kid, and kids are hyper malleable. And it definitely gets harder as we get older, but it does not ever get impossible. So please remember, no matter what, if you put time, energy, and repetition into something, your brain is going to rewire. Now, you rewire based on repetition because your brain is always trying to be efficient. It represents something like 2 or 3% of your body mass, and yet takes up 25% of the energy requirements of your body. Your brain is a caloric hog. And since evolutionarily speaking, calories were hard to come by, your brain is constantly trying to do things to optimize itself. Think about a computer that's running hot. It's trying to lower the resource requirements. And if you get what they call memory leaks in a computer, the computer crashes. The same is true of the brain. So evolution has made sure that we don't have these memory leaks, that we close those apps that are running in the background of the mind so that you don't need to use as many resources. One of the ways that it does it is a process called myelination. Myelination is what people mean when they talk about rewiring your brain. It's actually 2 parts. It's where the end of the neurons find each other and they connect and they wrap around each other. Okay, that's the first part of rewiring. And they will actually, if you stop using them, they will disconnect and they will search for something new. Again, you can see footage of this. Go on YouTube. Nobody's guessing at this. We know this is what happens. Now, when they find each other and you repeat, then what they're going to do is they get myelinated, which is a fatty tissue that is wrapped around those connection points so that the electrical impulses can travel faster, more efficiently. Now, the catch is when you do that, now what you've introduced to your brain is an easier way of doing something. And because your brain is constantly looking for efficiencies, it is going to do the thing which is easier, which is simply the thing that you repeat. As they say, neurons that fire together, wire together. And they fire together because you're doing it. They wire together because you're doing it a lot. That's repetition. So if you repeat dumb things, negative things, self-destructive things, that's going to become the easiest thing to think. So I guarantee you this is part of depression and anxiety. You're getting in a loop. It's not the only part, but it is part of that. You are getting in a loop because that's the easiest emotion to feel. It's the easiest thought to think, is the thing that you think and feel all the time. So learning to pattern interrupt that can become incredibly important. Repeating things that make you better at something you want to get good at, do it a lot. You're going to get more efficient at that. It's incredibly, incredibly important to recognize the biological truth of how that works. But if you're wondering if you can teach an old dog new tricks, the answer is an aggressive yes. So get out there and make use of it. There is one bit of self-talk that I've had basically my entire life that I wish I could have eliminated much faster, and that is the belief that I'm not smart enough to achieve my goals. Now, the reality is that we are all 50% hardwired and 50% malleable. So there is a reality to be faced that if intelligence is the ability to process raw data quickly, which is probably a little bit more complex than that, but that gets us close enough. I fall somewhere on that spectrum. And I can just tell you in terms of speed of processing, I'm somewhere in the average range. Maybe a little above, maybe a little below, but I'm somewhere in the average range. But I have been so haunted by the fact that there are other people that are way smarter than me, that things are easier for them than they are for me. That really held me back for a long time. And there is a movie called Amadeus, and it's about Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And in that movie is a character named Salieri. He's a real guy from history. Whether what I'm about to quote from the movie, whether he actually said it or not, I don't know. But this really defined my teenage years into my early 20s. And in the movie, Salieri laments to God, "Why did you make me just good enough at music?" Because he was a fellow composer to Mozart. "Why did you make me just good enough at music that I can tell that I'll never be as good as Mozart? Why couldn't you have made me as good or better than him? Or so much worse that I would never even think to compare myself?" And I thought, oh my God, that defines my level of intellect. I'm just smart enough to realize that I'll never be as smart as some of the super smart people. And
that really messed with me for more than a decade. And it wasn't until I realized, oh, wait, it doesn't matter where I start. I can get 100 times better at anything. So now it just becomes a question of what do I want to get better at? And that I need to change my frame of reference. I can lament to God all day, every day about the fact that I'm not the smartest human that ever existed, or, because that doesn't sound like a good use of time, or I can focus on getting 100 times better in an area that really matters to me and contributing meaningfully to people. And that change has rewarded me so tremendously with the only thing that matters, which is fulfillment. So 100%, I wish that I could have gotten over that much, much sooner. Self-talk is really important. You need to be very thoughtful about what you repeat. But if you want to be a high achiever, the thing that you have to practice far more than a growth mindset is the physics of progress. You just need to be running that process, because ultimately there's this weird relationship. It's not even weird. There is an intrinsic relationship between your mindset and your execution. Now, at the end of the day, only execution matters, meaning you could have the worst mindset in the world, but if you do the right things to be successful, you will be successful. And conversely, if you have the best mindset in the world, but you never take action, then you're never going to be successful. So you need to be running the physics of progress. But to run the physics of progress, you need that growth mindset. Because remember, the physics of progress go like this. You have a hypothesis on what you would need to do to achieve your goals. You're going to turn that hypothesis into the thing that you're actually going to do. Then you're going to go do that thing. You're going to fail to some degree at that thing. And then you're going to need to assess why you failed. Now, in reading the data in that moment and trying to tease apart what it is that you did that didn't work, you're going to need to take full responsibility, stare nakedly at your inadequacies so that you know what to do differently next time. But what high achievers understand that people with a fixed mindset don't is that you cannot allow yourself to tell a story about how it's something extrinsic to you outside of yourself that created that failure. You have to take full and complete responsibility. But by taking full and complete responsibility, you're now able to see what the data is trying to tell you. Failure is the most information-rich data stream on planet Earth. In the failure is the information that is going to help you actually get better. Now, the cool thing about a hypothesis is that it makes a prediction, right? That's the whole thing that this is contingent on. And yes, I know that this is recontextualizing the scientific method for success. But your hypothesis makes a prediction about what you need to do in order to accomplish something. When you fail, you realize that your base assumptions were slightly wrong and that you're going to have to improve upon your base assumptions in order to refine your hypothesis, in order to refine the thing that you do, in order to make a little bit more progress. And so that is what high achievers are absolutely obsessed with, is making sure that they are staring nakedly at their inadequacies, looking at the data, figuring out how they can adjust their base assumption to make a new prediction to give them a better way of executing. And doing that over and over and over, running that physics of progress, is how high achievers actually get to their goals. It's not that they were born a super genius. It's not that they were born with all of the answers. It's that they don't lie to themselves at that critical moment of failure, make it somebody else's problem. They go, there's something that I did wrong. My hypothesis isn't accurate. I must refine my hypothesis in order to make more progress. Making it somebody else's problem, soothing yourself with platitudes or anger, that's something I see a lot. If you want to see what a poor frame of reference looks like in the real world, go read the Twitter comments of people that are very successful. They are met with so much anger. I'm not even talking about myself, so please don't think this is a self-congratulatory thing. I'm saying go look at like the highest achievers on the planet. It is crazy how much vitriol there is in the comment section, especially if you're looking at people that have grown businesses. It is crazy. It's because people don't have a growth mindset. And so they're trying to protect themselves, which I actually get. It's a natural response that I spent a long time doing. My hands are covered in blood on this one. I spent so much time doing that. This is simply me recognizing my own past behavior. but I needed it to be somebody else's problem. I needed it to be my parents' problem for not giving me good enough genetics. I needed it to be the world's problem for me being raised in a lower middle class household. I needed it to be the world's problem that it was a system stacked against me. I needed all of that to be able to feel good about myself, which is critically important. But people that go on to be successful, that's not their frame of reference. That's not what they're thinking about. And so they're not just patting themselves on the back. They're not just saying, I'm good, I'm smart, I can pull this off. They're saying, what did I do wrong? Focusing obsessively on how they get better, refining their attempt, and then moving forward. And just making incremental progress relentlessly over time. That's the path forward. Let's put an action plan together that you can run over the next 30 days that are going to help you rewire your brain for growth and success. It looks like this. Number one, you become what you repeat. So you're going to start repeating things that move you towards your goals. The first thing that you're going to repeat is, I only do and believe that which moves me towards my goals. Number two, you're going to focus obsessively on the physics of progress. The physics of progress are, you're going to come up with a hypothesis on what you need to do to achieve your goals. You're then going to turn that hypothesis into something you can actually do. You're going to do that thing. It is going to fail to some extent. You're going to assess why it failed. That will give you clues on what was wrong with your hypothesis. You're going to reformulate your hypothesis in a more educated way. And then you're going to turn that into something that you can do. You're going to do that thing. It's going to fail to some degree. You're going to assess why it failed. You're going to adjust your base assumptions around your hypothesis, and you're going to repeat that over and over and over. The next thing that you're going to do is make a list of the most important things that you could be doing in order to be successful. So you need to have clarity on your goal. That is hugely important. Massive amounts of clarity on your goal. Then you're going to turn that into a list of things that you can do. You know you have enough clarity when you can write down a goal or a thing to do, that would tell you what to do with the next 15 minutes of your life. Most people come up with a plan that's so high level, they still have no idea what to do with the next 15 minutes of their life. Their goal is something that's going to take them 5, 10 years. And so knowing what to do right now in this minute becomes an example of somebody that doesn't have enough clarity about right now today. Your high level goal has to be translated into a very near term goal that you can achieve that is part of concentric rings for sure. But we want to make sure that we get into the list of things that we could be doing right now. Part of doing that is about habit building. And that's exactly what you have to do to rewire your brain. To rewire your brain, you need to repeat things. Okay, those are the things you're going to actively do. Now let's talk about what we're going to stop doing. We have to pattern interrupt because we're repeating negative things that are holding us back. If we don't recognize that our brain wires around that which we repeat, we won't understand how to unwire before we can rewire. So the way that you're going to unwire things is you're going to let them atrophy by pattern interrupting so that you stop reinforcing the wiring. Okay? What people get is these mantras that they have in their head about, I'm not good enough at this, I'm not talented enough, the world is holding me back, the world doesn't want to see people like me succeed. Whatever it is that you're repeating that is stopping you from acquiring new skills, that is stopping you from staring nakedly at your inadequacy so you can see what you need to change, what skills you need to adopt so that you can get better and make progress. So we have to stop repeating those things. So we're going to interrupt that by saying, the first thing I told you, I only do and believe that which moves me towards my goals. So, hey, I don't allow myself to repeat that I'm not good enough. I don't allow myself to repeat that I'm not going to be able to pull this off. I don't allow myself to repeat that the world is stacked against me. I don't allow myself to repeat that this isn't my fault. I don't allow myself to repeat anything that doesn't move me towards my goals. And so what that's going to do is that's going to allow for atrophy to happen in that wiring. Because neurons that fire together wire together. So whatever thing that's negative that I've been repeating, that's really reinforced in my brain. And I have to first pattern interrupt so that I'm not repeating those things so that those grips can begin to loosen so that as I'm doing the things that we said we're going to start doing, saying those positive things, we're taking action, we're looking at the things that we need to do
to actually achieve our goals. We're doing those. We're turning them into a habit. Now I can let atrophy set in on the negative things that have hardwired in my brain, and I can start repeating the positive loop that I need to be in around repeating positive things, only doing that which moves me towards my goals, making sure that I have clarity on my goals, making sure that I translate my goal into actionable items, and turning that whole process into a habit so that I'm sitting down every day and I'm writing out my important things list. I'm taking the vast majority of my time to actually execute on the physics of progress. And I'm just running that in a loop, constantly looking at the data. How is it telling me how to get better? And if you exist in that loop for 30 days, you will really feel that you're starting to make progress. And then if you repeat that for the next 30 years, no one will be able to stop you. All right, everybody, that is the power of developing a growth mindset. I hope that you will use all of the things that we just talked about in order to hardwire a growth mindset in your life, because it is the only frame of reference from which you can actually execute on your goals and have the kind of success that you've always wanted. Get after it.
So the whole idea, if you want to live the good life, is to recognize that you are a deeply flawed individual that is holding yourself back, that your life is a reflection entirely of your choices and not your circumstances. And if you're not happy with that, that means that you're doing something wrong. So I'll define right and wrong as it's right when it moves you towards your goal and it's wrong when it moves you away. So if you're not where you want to be, you are by definition doing something wrong. But most people can't work through the loop that I call the physics of progress because their ego stops them at a critical part. So the physics of progress go like this. You have a guess as to how you're going to get to your goal. So first of all, it assumes you know what your goal is. But for now, let's assume that you do know your goal. So you've got a guess. This is what I would need to do in order to get to my goal. You're going to do that thing and it's going to fail. Now, we all have to struggle with, I tried the thing and it failed. The problem is most people put up their ego defenses, find a way to believe that it was somebody else's fault. It was the economy. It was where I was born. It was that my parents didn't have money. It's that the system is rigged, whatever. Because those are probably valid reasons why it's going to be harder for that person than the next person, they stop. But let's go back to my definition of right and wrong. Right is that which moves you towards your goals. Wrong is that which moves you away. So people then are blind to the fact that they're saying that their real goal is to get where they're going, make $1 million, have a successful business, be a teacher, whatever. But the reality is their real goal is to feel good about themselves. Most people never have the self-awareness to avoid that conflict. And then even if they have the self-awareness that they're in a conflict, they don't realize that they could shift their self-esteem around instead of being right. So what I tried was right. And the only reason it didn't work is because the world is stacked against me. Might actually be true. But how are you going to move forward? Because there is some better thing that's going to move you forward. Most people are never going to see that because they stop at making it somebody else's fault. The next thing you have to do is you have to be optimistic. You have to believe what I call the only belief that matters, that if I failed at something, it's because I'm not good enough yet, but I can get good. And so many people believe, because it really feels this way, you believe that your talent and intelligence are fixed traits. And the reason you believe that is it gets harder as you get older to get those huge gains that you get. Like when you're a little kid and you can't walk, it's like this whole binary 0 to 1 moment of like, whoa, I couldn't and now I can, this is incredible. And then you get to first grade and it's like, can't do math, now I can do math. Wow, that's pretty cool. Can't do multiplication tables, now I can. You start to get to algebra and it's like, oh God, I don't know, this is not as easy as I hoped it would be. You start having failures. You get rejected by girls. Like you start getting all these things that stack up where the path to stand up, practice walking, it doesn't work as well. You're also, as you get older, you are less plastic. So it actually does become harder to learn new things. Also, you begin to find the things that work for you. And so you think, oh, well, I know how to do this. I've done it really well. And then you encounter that moment where it stops working. And so now it's like, oh, wait a second. It was working, so I had my big 0 to 1 moment, then it stopped working, and people confuse that with hitting the edge of their abilities, not realizing you've only hit the edge of your current skill set. So I remind myself in business all the time, My current skill set has already taken me as far as it's going to take me. And so if I want to go farther, I have to get better. But if you don't believe that you can get better, then you won't put the energy and effort into getting better. But because it becomes incrementally more difficult to get better, you begin to confuse it with I've reached the edge of my capabilities. Then if your ego is built around I'm right, not that I can identify the right answer, I am right. So I've done all the things, I hit the edge of my current abilities, and I have a belief that I don't know that I can get any better. And I have the ego defenses coming saying it was somebody else's fault anyway. Cool, then I'm off the hook. I don't have to be confrontational of this reality that I've reached the edge of what I'm capable of, which sucks. That feeling of like, I'll never be as good as somebody else, that feeling eats at us in a really gnarly way. So that's where you get clobbered to death with, I no longer am optimistic that I can get better because all my big gains, my early gains, those went away. And my subconscious hands me a ready-made excuse for why this isn't my fault, and I take it and I exit. And that brings us to the third thing, repetition. You become what you repeat. So people that don't repeat things, they don't try over and over, they just give up really easily, they are destined for failure. If you don't have a massive amount of resilience, you are really in trouble. And most people don't have resilience. And so if I'm talking about the 5 things that you do that really like take you down a dark path, don't be resilient. Give up easily. Because if it's true that you can get better, but the sort of early big wins begin to diminish and you're gonna have to work harder and push harder and be more consistent, then it's like by giving up, you never get better. And so now you're reinforcing, hey, not only was it somebody else's fault, you couldn't get better anyway, so why would it matter? Don't even try. And so everything that reinforces that don't even try is how people get themselves into a super dark place. Another thing that's really gonna hold people back is if you are comparing yourself to somebody else and you're letting that diminish your sense of self. So I would constantly, if I wanted to fail, I would constantly compare myself to other people and be like, I'm a total loser and I have the proof because look at all these other people and they're doing way better than I am. They're ahead of me. I remember, oh God, every filmmaker of my generation had a moment when they turned 24, when they realized that what, at least for my generation, was considered arguably the greatest film of all time was Citizen Kane. Really is awesome, by the way. Even though it's black and white and it's old as shit for the TikTok generation, they're never gonna go for it. But it's a really fantastic film. And Orson Welles made it when he was 24. And he made it when arguably the most powerful man in the world. So imagine somebody like Bill Gates coming after you. And, oh God, even better, one of the guys that owns like a media conglomerate, Jeff Bezos, owns the Washington Post. So the guy, Rudolph Hearst, owned what at the time was the media publication. Citizen Kane is about that guy. So it would be like somebody making a movie about Jeff Bezos and that he's corrupt and lonely. And Jeff Bezos is like, oh, you think you're gonna actually tell that story? Nah, I'm clamping down. I'm gonna get your funding revoked. I'm gonna make sure that nobody screens the film, all that. So this guy at 24 gets this movie made when everybody thinks, oh, this guy's literally gonna kill him, have him killed, or he's gonna stop his movie from being funded. Then not only does he get it made, but it becomes arguably the greatest film of all time. And so you hit this moment where you're like, Orson Welles is just better than I'll ever be. Why am I even trying? Then back into not being resilient, then back into all the things that you're trying just aren't working, on and on and on. And then the last thing is, if I really wanted to mess somebody up, I mean, I really want to break their ability to go anywhere in life, I'm going to make sure that I mess up their body. I'm going to make sure that they aren't getting the sleep they need. I'm going to make sure that they eat a ton of sugar. I'm going to make sure that they're overweight. I'm going to make sure that they don't exercise. And that is going to destroy their cognition in 1,000 ways. They're going to be in a level of pain they don't even realize they're in because they've never not had a stomach ache when they eat. They've never not eaten right before they go to bed and had their sleep disrupted because they've got food just sitting in their digestive tract. They don't even know. Brain fog, all that stuff. And so those are the 5 things I would do if I really, the funny thing, even as I'm saying, I can't make it about me. I've got to like, if I were going to mess up somebody else, those are the things that I would do.
Wow. But gotta avoid like the plague.
Like the plague.
But so the fourth one, like it just feels so like insurmountable. Like this guy, 24, like he did it, and I'm not 24, but I'm 24. But let's say I'm like 26, and I'm still not there yet. So
yeah.
like,
let's say you're 40. Say you're 46. Let's say you're 50. So this is the trap. is by comparing yourself to other people, it's going to diminish your sense of self. It pulls you out of that optimistic mode. And the reality is, I may never make a film as good as Citizen Kane. I may never be as good as Walt Disney. That's the real person I'm chasing. I may never accomplish what Elon Musk has accomplished. And so I do the thought exercise. And the words I want to introduce to people are, and now what? So you're never going to be whoever it is that you look up to and you admire. You're never going to be as good as them. And now what? Do you give up? Do you cry all day? Do you accept a lesser life? Or do you go ham? And so the thing that I want people to understand, you can get 100 times better at whatever. Now, most people spend so much time lamenting that they'll never be as good as whatever person it is that they look up to and fantasize about and want to be, that they never 100x their own abilities. And so their life is far less than it could have been. So what I have found through experience, even though I still feel the sting of not being as good as the people that I admire or having to face that Walt Disney had done way more than I've done by this point in his life. Even if he didn't have as much money as I have, he certainly had built something far more that represented what he wanted to do far more than what I have done, right? My whole life has been about finally getting to that moment, and I haven't. And maybe it forever recedes into the distance. But what I've learned through experience is the act of going ham is so intoxicating, is so fun, that it is the juice. But most people are broken emotionally by the comparison. And so to some extent, you just can't allow yourself to do it.
How do you unlearn the beliefs that got you here that are now holding you back?
So you have to let them atrophy. So if you want your negative beliefs to atrophy, then you have to really stop using them. So number one, read the book Feeling Great by David D. Burns. It's all about cognitive behavioral therapy. But one of the core tenets of cognitive behavioral therapy is pattern interrupting. So you have cognitive distortions. You're repeating things to yourself that aren't true. I'll never be able to. I'm not as good as, I could never, right? Those are all cognitive distortions. You don't know that that's true. You won't know that that's true until you spend a lifetime trying and you're on your deathbed and you're like, well, I'm out of time. Now I really know I really won't be able to do it. Or by then you will have accomplished so much if you really are that diligent and persistent. So you have to pattern interrupt. You have to break out of that thing that you repeat. Now, what I find fascinating is the reason that pattern interrupting is so important, the reason that the only way to begin to let those negative beliefs dissipate is by not using them, is because neurons that fire together wire together. It's an evolutionary advantage. It's actually a really good thing. This is why you can pick something and get good at it, because your brain is an energy hog. From an evolutionary perspective, we have this weird dueling, competing desires that are baked into our brain. One, go hard, go out there, chase after it, get it, right? Grand ambition. But then you also have the desire to sit on the couch and eat potato chips. Because your brain is so hungry for calories, it eats up 25% of the calories that you intake into your body. Now, when you can just go to the grocery store and get a bag of potato chips, it's not a problem. But when you have to go out and face death every day to hunt, to gather, all of that, you have to have evolutionary pressure to chill, right? So you go out, you get what you need, don't keep going. So you've got it, now you need to calm down, because your brain, just to keep everything going, is gonna gobble through those calories. So I can't also have the body going ham all the time. What the brain does is go, all right, from a biological standpoint, I've got to make these thoughts as efficient as humanly possible so that we're not 50% or 75% of the caloric energy. So it does things to make them more efficient. And one of the things that it does is it myelinates the connection points. So when you do things, and I think people underestimate the complexity of a habit. So a habit isn't just seeing something, doing something, hearing something, feeling something, smelling. It's all of those things put together, right? So you've got the habit loop trigger, you've got then the desire to pursue the drip of dopamine that you know that you're gonna get, you've got the sights and sounds that might be all a part of that. All that stuff is wired together. So it's this huge cluster of neuronal firing, and it all gets this fatty tissue wrapped around it. So it's like this ball of activity. And so you get into these patterns of activity that are the easiest thing for you to think and feel. So if the easiest thing for you to think and feel is a negative thought that you repeat to yourself over and over and over, and that your brain goes, oh, we do this a lot, we feel this way a lot, we think this thing a lot, rad, let me make it super easy. So now when you get back into, I'm a loser, I'm not gonna do that, I'll never accomplish that, or just like a negative doom scroll on TikTok or whatever, that becomes the most efficient thing for your body to do. And you crave that feeling. You are pushed into the efficiency from an evolutionary standpoint. So you have to interrupt it. You have to stop the thought, stop the activity, whatever, and then begin to build something new. So you stop using the old one, and then you force a demand on the brain so that it's unwiring these things and making these new wiring connections and connecting that. And because tissues in the body, you never keep if they're not needed. So if you think about muscle, right? If you work out like a demon, you get a yoked physique. And then you stop working out, 6 months later, you're gonna be way closer to where you started before you started lifting than the lift. And I would say probably a year, 18 months out, no one would ever know, even if you had a massive amount of muscle. Because your body's just like, muscle's expensive calorically. If I don't need it, I'm gonna get rid of it. And so when you stop using a pattern in your brain, then the connections are going to dissipate. It's not going to be the first thing that occurs to you anymore. You're going to be out of that habit loop. In fact, to push this to the extreme, during the Vietnam War, there was massive amounts of drug use. And people would get addicted to opioids, heroin, all that stuff. Most of them just stopped when they came back. And the reason that they stopped when they came back was they just didn't have access to it. They didn't know who to talk to. Like, I'll tell you right now, I would have done psilocybin or whatever by now if I could reliably get it. But I don't have anybody that I know how to get it from. So I've tried like a tiny bit here and there, but that's it. So it's when you don't have it in your environment, you don't think about it, you don't reach for it, you don't crave it. So you've got to do that break apart. But then to make it easier, make sure that you're leaning into something new that's powerful that you can repeat.
I want to go back to capabilities and skill set and ask you how you would advise a person who has ventured off in different career paths. They've tried so many things in their lifetime. They've excelled in all of them, but at the end of the day, they're the jack of all trades and the master of nothing. So I want to hear your advice on that. And a follow-up question is, do you think that that's the way to go, or do you think they should stop and just reassess and focus on one thing?
What outcome do you want?
Like, let's also say, because another question I had was, how does somebody go about finding their passion who's completely lost?
Okay, so those are two wildly different questions.
Yeah.
So how you find your passion, we'll set aside. Now we'll just say you don't find it. It is an architectural build, not an archaeological dig. But going back to the first part, so you have to know what you want to accomplish. So for most people, when they fantasize about their life, they fantasize about becoming the GOAT of something. Like, I'm going to be the greatest singer of all time. If you want that, just think about LeBron James. If LeBron James were simultaneously trying to be the greatest basketball player of all time, the best singer of all time, the best accountant of all time, you'd be like, hey, LeBron, I've got money on you this weekend. You better get your ass on the basketball court. Stop fucking around with accounting, right? So we know when it's somebody else exactly what they should be doing if they want to be the greatest of all time. You need a maniacal focus. You need to be lasered in on one thing, and you do it to the abstraction of everything else, and you do it obsessively to the point where everything else in your life ideally is falling apart, right? It's just, and I say ideally as the person with money on, LeBron James. It's like, I don't want you to think about it. I want you to be like Tom Brady. Like, from what I hear, and I don't know that this is true, but given that he just got divorced, I'm going to guess that it is, that he would make his family sleep somewhere else when he had like a big game coming up. He did not want distractions. He wanted to be totally laser focused, literally to the point where everything else in his life is falling apart. But you want to talk GOATs, that guy is going to go down in history. Now, having said all of that, I find it very hard in my own life to just say, oh, I'm going to do this one thing. This channel would be way bigger if I just interviewed one kind of guest over and over and over, and everybody knew exactly what they were going to get. And I didn't try to branch out and cover more things that I find fascinating. This channel would be a lot bigger if we didn't have the entertainment side where we're trying to do comics and video games and all that stuff, right? If I were just maniacally focused on having the best interview series YouTube channel ever. I know that, but that's not the life that I want to live. That's why the first question is, what do you want? Because ultimately, my advice to people is to chase fulfillment. And fulfillment has to do with, what do you love, right? So you're going to have to discover that. You're going to find that initial bump of like, ooh, this thing gives me more energy than it takes. But it's not like when I was a kid, I was like, oh, I want to have a YouTube channel. I didn't even think I want to build the next Disney. I created that over time. When I was at Quest, I was actually perfectly happy to do storytelling inside of a protein bar company, right? Because I just needed meaning and purpose. Now, I knew I wanted to storytell. I've known that since I was 12, but it wasn't like the central passion of my life to build the next Disney until I decided to make it that. And so when I was, I probably would have been 37, 38 the first time I said, oh, I'm going to build the next Disney. So it's, that's a lot of my life where I had another mission that I would have stated, another passion that I would have said. Now, storytelling was always one of my passions, but I actually would have told you that it was filmmaking. So I would have said, oh, I want to be a director. That was my earliest thing. And I invested a lot into that, which is how it went from being an interest to being a passion. So I want people to understand, you don't look inwards and find a passion. You look inwards and find something that gives you more energy than it takes. Then you invest in that to see if it's really going to be a fascination. If the more you do it, the more you push yourself into learning about it, if the more you're like, whoa, this is really cool, I love this, that's a fascination. Now, if you want to turn it into a passion, you're going to go through the process of gaining mastery. For something to be a passion, I think you have to get feedback from the world. Okay, I happen to know that you're a singer, and an amazing one at that. And I know human psychology enough to know when you played me your song for the first time, and I freaked out, that feeds into your sense of like, wow, I worked really hard to get good at something, and this person's having a really big emotional reaction, and that's part of how I want to contribute to the world. I want to sing in a way that moves people. You saw that it moved me. Now you're in that loop that I call the passion loop. So for it to be passion, you need to work really hard to get good at something that matters to other people, and you need both the shout, meaning when you sing, it makes you feel some kind of way, and the echo, where I hear what you've worked so hard at, and I'm like, oh my God. And now you're in this loop where you're like, I want to get even better because I want more people to react like that. Now you're in a passion loop. Now, where people get into trouble is going back to the first question. So now you're in this passion loop. You should be fine with, hey, I sing, it makes people feel awesome, we're good, right? No, because you're comparing yourself to other people. You have this huge goal that you want to attain. And so now you've got something outside. You try to achieve it. You get knocked back. It didn't work the way that you thought it was going to work. What does that say about me? Possibly you make it other people's fault, or you just give up and go, wow, I'm really not capable, which then makes you feel terrible about yourself, which then makes you not love the singing as much as you did before. And you get into this super self-destructive loop. So let me tell you what monks have figured out that other people don't get. That desire to want more is a double-edged sword. A monk is somebody who realizes, oh, this thing that makes me feel alive and pushes me to be better also cuts me down and makes me dislike myself and makes me lose passion for the thing that I loved right before I started comparing myself. And so the choice that they choose is to opt out of the rat race. And so they're like, I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to let go of desire because I realize that desire is the root of all suffering. Now, I take a totally different approach. And I go, well, I know I'm going to suffer. I know the world's going to kick me in the face. I know that I'm not going to be, I want to be the greatest at everything I ever think of. I know that just isn't going to be true. So I had to come to peace with, okay, you're never going to be as good at all the things that you want to be good at. And so now how do you play the game? And so for me, I like to be broader maybe than somebody who's going to like really be the goat at something. But I just want to enjoy my life. I want to enjoy the shout and the echo. And so for me to, if I just wanted to enjoy the echo, I would go in the YouTube comments, I would figure out what they want me to do, and I would just do that. If I want to enjoy both the shout and the echo, I find this balance of, here's a range of things that I like, because trust me, here's how many things I want to spend my life on. Here's how many things I do spend my life on. Here's what I would have to do if I wanted to be the GOAT. And I just realized that for me, being that myopically focused on something doesn't make me feel the way that I want to feel. And so I understand that that means that I probably won't achieve, I know I won't achieve as much if I were to broaden it, but I only want to broaden it so much so that I can still achieve, quite frankly, on a massive global scale that will echo through human history.
Don't you think you will actually be the GOAT of your niche by focusing on multiple skills that synergize rather than just focusing on the one thing to be the best at it?
All right, so you have to hold two competing ideas in your head. So here's the truth about what it's like to be inside my own mind. I imagine myself in a Dragon Ball Z Super Saiyan moment with flames all around me, screaming, like morphing into something huge and unstoppable. But at the same time, I understand that the reality is that this is probably going to be a struggle and I may never become the GOAT. But I don't accept that internally. Internally, I'm like, okay, maybe it doesn't happen. But what if you play all out like it is going to happen? What if you act like it is an inevitability, that if you keep pushing as hard as you can and moving forward, that you will eventually get there? But I know so well that if I only reward myself for becoming the GOAT, then my life hinges on one final moment. And I know two things. One, it is wiser, not as probably, it is wiser to enjoy the climb than to reach the summit. And then two, because I know that I may never get there, I don't want to constantly have my thing in the future, because the future will always let you down. Now the question is why? This goes back to evolution. The reason the future always lets you down is because we have hunger. This is why we equate the desire for food, the desire for sex, the desire for success. We say hungry. I'm hungry for whatever, because that's what it feels like. And hunger can only be momentarily satiated. It can't be permanently, because you would die, right? So if all you had was the motivation to go get one meal and eat the biggest meal, the biggest feast that you possibly can, if that's all evolution got you to do, and then you ate it, you were full and like, I'm full forever, you would die. So once you understand this in evolutionary context of there is a sub-program running in your brain to make sure that you're just going to keep going and going and going. So I'm very careful about how I approach my life to make sure that I acknowledge the truth of the human condition, which is that I'm having a biological experience, which is that I will always have hunger no matter how much I eat. I mean, I'll momentarily be sated, but it won't last. And so I'm super careful to enjoy the climb, because I know the struggle is guaranteed, but the success is not. And I know better than to make my whole life hinge on the future, because even when I get to the future, even if I was the GOAT and I stand towering above all the accomplishments of Walt Disney, I'll still be like, yo, what's next? It's an inevitability.
Do you think everybody's like that? Like, or do you think there's ever going to be a time when you, like what you said, you're like hovering over all of your accomplishments? Like somebody would be capable of being, I'm good. Like, that's it. Do you think that's a you thing, or like, do you think everybody always wants more?
It is 100% that every single person has drive, hunger. It is also true that that's a spectrum. It's just a personality trait. So we all have it to some degree, but the question is how much. Now, I'm probably pretty close to pegged out, where I'm willing to suffer to the point where other people worry about me, because I just push myself and push myself and push myself. So not everybody's going to be like that. Also, I think there are people that have a different value system than I have. So take a monk. They like the idea of, I want to disengage from the world. I realize the toxic nature of never-ending pursuit, that there will never be a meal so satisfying that I don't want to eat again. So why do I allow myself? Let me transcend that. So for them, they would train themselves to let go of that, to not give into it. I feed into it. I have looked at both options before me, and one resonates with me at a conceptual level, because it's not like, oh, I went and became a monk for 30 years. And I'm like, oh, rad, now let me go like really like pour myself into building something and see which I prefer. But I flirted with them both enough to know, at least at the early stage, which one I find constantly energizing. And the one I find constantly energizing is building. And even when I fail, I'm still energized by it. And I'm very careful with my ego not to let it get tied up in that. But everybody's going to make a different choice. But I think that people that don't face the reality of what they want, their life is going to be very sad. And so what I'm always trying to do, and what I'm trying to get people to understand, go after it. Want to be the best and really go after it. Like, I mean, give it your everything. But don't value yourself on whether you achieve it or not. So the thing that I value myself for, the thing that I reward and punish myself for, is, did I show up and play to win? Not did I win? Did I show up and play to win? And since I show up and play to win almost every day, not every day, every now and then I'm off my game, but I play to win, man. And I'm tracking myself from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed. And if I'm like, yo, you played to win today, and by the way, I had a good time doing it, like I love that shit, then I'm good. But as somebody who has succeeded and failed many times, I learned very early to reward myself for the pursuit and not for the accomplishment.
So you're extremely self-aware, and I feel like that's something really hard to teach, but how would you go about helping someone become more self-aware of what's right for them?
Dude, I love this question. So the way to get more self-aware has become an obsession for me because I'm trying to become more self-aware in myself. So those moments where you break through and you're like, oh, wow, I didn't even realize that that was a part of my personality. That was, this is water, right? It's so ubiquitous in my life. I don't even realize it as a choice or a way that I view the world. It was completely invisible to me. And then someone will say something and you finally go, whoa, I can see me now from your perspective. And I realize that is what self-awareness is. You can finally see yourself the way other people see you. There is no more water. There is only the awareness that, oh, I'm constantly wet. So I've started thinking, okay, how is it that I do that? How do I, and look, I am blind still, and it horrifies me every time I have an awareness. I'm like, oh my God, I got to this age and I never realized that about myself. It was a little unnerving. But I've become aware of so many different things that it comes back to tying a revelation to a bodily sensation. So what I try to do is realize what I am feeling at any one time, and then be honest about why I am feeling it, and being able to track that down. And so figuring out, there's this idea that Jordan Peterson has of micro personalities. And he says that's the best way to understand yourself. So an alcoholic, when they're jonesing for a fix, just in the grips of the alcoholism, they become a different person. So they have a whole subset of their personality that's now in control, that might lie, cheat, lack integrity, push other people down, whatever, to get that alcohol. Like one thing you learn if you're a lifeguard is they say, if you go to rescue a drowning person, odds are they're going to try to drown you as well. Just because they're just trying to get air, man. They stopped being like the loving, caring person because when you want that like breath of air that badly, like you're just going to do whatever it takes to make it happen. You have to be aware that these micro personalities take over. And so when you have a feeling, odds are that represents a micro personality that you've slipped into. And if you can recognize, oh, when I feel this, I bet I am a certain way. Now to other people, that almost doesn't feel like a spectrum of you. It's like, oh, here we go. They're in their annoyed phase. They're pissed off, and I know how they are when they're like that. They're scared and they act this way. They're depressed and they act that way, right? So for them, it's like these discrete versions of you, these micro personalities. So what I began to realize was, oh, when I feel this way, I manifest this way. I have a microcosm of personality traits that cluster together that are hyper predictable to people outside of me. But because the emotion feels so justified to me, it's water. I don't even see it. It seems like this is the only way to react to this moment. There is no other way. Everybody in my position would react exactly like this. So it isn't a micro personality. It's just how one should act. And so it's not like you're even thinking about that. You're just like stimulus response. Now, what I've trained myself to do is go, I feel something. What do I feel? Whoa, I'm agitated. Why am I agitated? Well, they obviously did something wrong. No. What do I know, right? Because I have these rules. And so I walk down. Rule number 1, if somebody's angry, I guarantee an insecurity has been triggered. Now, there's actually things at the edges. I'll leave that aside for now. So I recognize, ooh, I'm agitated. I know that that means an insecurity has been triggered. What insecurity has been triggered? But it was training myself through having these realizations of like, oh, I get this flustered feeling and now I want to argue for an idea that's mine. Oh, I'm feeling stupid. Okay, so that's what I do whenever I feel stupid. But it really was tracking back as I would like replay the day. Like, I don't like the way that feels. And in fact, that's where it started. I don't want to feel that way again. How do I avoid it? To avoid it, you have to figure out what caused it. As far as I can tell, that's other than getting feedback from other people. So empowering people to tell you like, hey, why are you acting like that? It's not pleasant. I don't like the way you're talking to me, whatever. Or after the fact, hey, you came across really harsh. I didn't respect the way you handled that. It's like, ooh, whoa. Like it was invisible to me. I had no idea. Like there was one time during a company team meeting where I was like, hey, everybody's got to step up. Now, because I love that kind of language, I like, yo, we got this, we can do it, but everybody's got to rise up. I was completely taken aback that somebody gave me a dot, which is feedback for people watching this. And they were like, yo, that was really hard to hear. And I was like, huh? And so because for me, I love that shit, war language, like we got to do this, we got to get better. I'm not saying, oh, you're a loser and you need to get better. I'm just like, this is a human condition. Our current skill set's already taken us as far as it's going to go. If we want to go somewhere in the future that's farther, we have to get better. But that gave me the like, oh, wow, I see how that part of my personality comes across to other people. Now, I may still use that tool, but at least I won't be blind to it. Now I have self-awareness, literally aware of self from another person's perception, and I can act accordingly.
And then a last question on this is being able to see yourself from a different perspective. Are the things that either trigger you or whatever caused by some sort of like some experience in your childhood that is a pattern that you exhibit, which causes these emotions in other people?
I think it's inevitable that you are shaped by everything that happens to you in your life, and you formulate responses and you repeat those responses. They get hardwired in your brain, and so you act a very predictable way in a given set of circumstances. But I personally can't track back, oh, this is because of that thing that happened. For me, there's precious few things like that.
So it's more about the personality and how your personality is just you, but then if you see it from a different personality type, it'll seem that's how you'll understand more about yourself.
What caused that, or how I end up taking in the information about what I'm like to other people?
A little bit of both.
So the way that we become who we are, you're 50% hardwired, your personality, and you're 50% malleable, your response to all the different things that happen to you, and your ability to unwind some of that. So there are things about ourselves that we can unwind and we can be different, and people are like, whoa, like I will tell you in my marriage, Lisa and I are dramatically different people than we were at the beginning. And we will point out to each other, hey, that barb in your personality, I actually don't like that. Some have been easier to change than others. And so it's like, wow, like there are some things, even though I'm aware of them, I can articulate it. I can even say, I've slipped into that thing that you hate. I can't stop myself from doing it yet. So some of those things prove very difficult to unwind. So for instance, I constantly slide back into optimism. Like no matter where things are going, like I find myself like, but we could ultimately, and then it's like, Lisa's like, hey, we have to reground. We've got to really think about how this is going to happen. And so we'll butt heads over that, where I'll slip back into the dream, the big vision, and she can't be there. It's stressing her out. She's like, I need to know how we're going to pull this off. And so not doing that is very hard. Now, you can get better, you can train yourself. Okay, so that's part one. Nature and nurture, they collide. I think it was Lisa Feldman Barrett that said, we have a nature that requires nurture. So they are so intertwined, it's almost pointless to try to tease out like what half is what. Just there's a process to run for change that is outside the scope of this answer. Every time that you get to something you want to change, run the process. If you do that diligently for 3 years and you're still having a hard time making a change, odds are you've hit close to bedrock of the 50% that's unchangeable. Okay, so the other part, how do I peg my sense of self-awareness? This really comes down to, there's only so many personality types, right? So let's ballpark it. Let's say there's 50-ish types of people that you're gonna meet. Of course, you can boil it down to like the 5 types or whatever, but it feels more nuanced in reality. It's not like everybody you meet, you're like, oh, you're this, you're that, and there's only 5. Like people definitely feel like shades and blends of those big 5 traits. So let's just call it 5 sort of 50 big buckets that you're gonna encounter different people. It's like, oh, okay, I'm beginning to understand how when I act that way, how that kind of person sees me. That's really useful. Now, as you begin to collect that data, you're going to drive yourself crazy, constantly trying to be the way that that person is going to be able to respond to you. So there are things that I will take in and go, okay, that's really useful. You can never know too much about how you come across. But there's also, I need to live my life on how I feel as well. So if I'm going to go into battle, even though my battles are always business, if I'm going to go into battle, I'm going to call it battle because that resonates with me. Now, if that doesn't resonate with other people, in some circumstances, I'm going to make sure that I speak in a way that is understood by more people. And other times I'm going to be like, I need to feel a certain way to perform the way that I want to perform. And I'm going to go in with all of my language and all of that. The key is to just be aware of it so that you grab a tool when it's useful. So for instance, I try never to be out of control of my anger. I won't say that it doesn't happen, but damn is it rare. So I was recently on a call with lawyers and I realized anger is the only thing that's going to move this forward. And so I had to display very controlled, trust me, I wasn't a raging lunatic, but I had to display a very controlled anger to let them know, hey, this is what we're doing, was bringing the opposing sides together. And so I had to make sure that the intensity of a given point was communicated through emotion. So I need to know, cool, this feeling that I'm getting of being really annoyed, really frustrated, and wanting to punch through my computer, it's like, okay, some insecurity has been triggered. What insecurity? That I'm not going to be able to achieve what I want to achieve in the business. That's going to stop me from achieving my goals. If I don't achieve my goals, as much as I know better than to build my self-esteem around the accomplishment, I'm still highly invested in the accomplishment. So cool. I know why I'm feeling it. Am I going to display it? That becomes the question. Is it useful in this moment? So for instance, I was in a near rage. That entire call lasted 2.5 hours. But how many minutes of that call would anybody on the call know that I was that annoyed? 7? So it's like you have to have the awareness to turn it into a tool, and then you have to have the control of your emotions to wield the tool appropriately.
One thing that people do not understand is that you can literally change the way that you think. You can rewire your brain and develop a mindset that can lead you to achieving whatever it is that you set your mind to and are willing to pay the price to actually achieve. But the question is how? The reason that mindset is so important is at the end of the day, only execution matters. So if you have big dreams, if you have goals, something that you're trying to accomplish in your life, you're going to have to execute against that. So why do I say that mindset is so important in that scenario? The reason is that ultimately to achieve the things you want to achieve, I can promise you when you start out, you're not good enough yet to achieve that, and or you don't have the right plan. And so the way to refine the plan to actually do the thing that you want to accomplish, you're going to have to run through what I call the physics of progress. The physics of progress are very simple. They require you to have a hypothesis, which is simply your best guess. This is what I think I have to do to achieve my goals. Then you're going to turn that into something you can do. You're going to do that thing. It's going to fail to some degree. That's just the way it works. But failure is the most information-rich data stream on planet Earth. But to accurately assess the data and figure out what it's telling you about why you failed to some extent or why it was more inefficient than it needs to be, you have to be willing to stare nakedly at your own inadequacies, take responsibility for the outcome, not make it somebody else's fault or the economy's fault or whatever, any external force. If you're making it an external problem, you're never going to be able to learn the lesson you need to learn in order to improve your behavior so that you can then execute better and make more progress. That really is it. That's the physics of progress. Hypothesis. Turn it into something actionable. Run that action. Learn from the partial failure. Get a little bit smarter. Come up with a new hypothesis that is more informed. Turn it into something actionable. Run that, it will fail again to some degree. Figure out why by lowering your defenses, having a growth mindset, making sure that you are able to take on the responsibility. Now, why is that a mindset question? Why can't you just run that equation if it really is that simple? The answer is you have in your brain something called the psychological immune system. This is something given to you by millions of years of evolution. We should all be extremely grateful for it. And the psychological immune system's job is to make sure that you don't commit suicide. It is designed to make you feel better about things. It's the reason why you can mess up, make a mistake, and you can soothe yourself. Now, the problem is that the goal of the psychological immune system is not for you to achieve your goals. It's simply to make sure that you feel good enough about yourself that you can keep moving through life.
Now, the reason that that becomes wildly problematic and is one of the most important things that you have to address in your mindset if you're going to be successful is because the number one tool that your psychological immune system works to soothe your ego is to make everything somebody else's fault. It is the fault of the government. It is the fault of rich people. It is the fault of not being born the right color, not being born the right sex, so on and so forth. It is making something the external problem. Now, here's the really bad news. Your psychological immune system is going to grab for a very valid excuse. Those things that I listed may all be true. They may really all be holding you back. The problem is you want to know what the right mindset for success is. And if you want to be successful, you are going to have to overcome an endless parade of problems. And to overcome the endless parade of problems, you have to have a way to take responsibility for what you can do differently to overcome those problems. Instead of being annoyed, instead of shutting down, instead of just pointing the finger, you want to adapt your behavior. It sucks that the second law of thermodynamics is that all things move towards chaos. It sucks that humans are so complicated and so weird that we don't just lift each other and love each other, which we do and is amazing. We tear each other down, we kill each other. Man, read history books. It will terrify you about how brutal humans can be. It is crazy how many different times and places throughout history we have just slaughtered people in mass numbers in the most horrifying way that you can possibly imagine. So if humans can slide all the way to that level of depraved madness, and we know that everything moves towards chaos, how do we bring the massive amount of order that we have to bring to the world so that we can march everlong towards success and actually achieve it? The only way to overcome chaos, the only way to overcome entropy, which is the fancy name for chaos, is to pour energy into the system. So you have to constantly pour energy into your own life to make sure that you're making progress to your goals if you're going to eventually achieve success. And the only way that you're going to be able to do that is to have a growth mindset. Now, really simply, a growth mindset is that you believe that your talent and intelligence are not fixed traits, that you can get better at something as you put time and energy into getting better at that thing. It's what I call the only belief that matters. The only belief that matters is that by applying time and energy into something, you will actually get better at it. Now, once you believe that, everything in your life downstream of that gets better because now you know, oh, I messed up at this thing. I suck at that thing. The world is trying to stop me from doing that thing. The world is effective at stopping me from doing that thing. Oh, word? All I need to do is go and get better and I can outperform people. As Kobe Bryant said, and this has become my favorite quote in the world, boos don't block dunks. Now, what did he mean by that? He meant that no matter what, you can get so good that people can't stop you. People were paid millions of dollars to stop Kobe Bryant from scoring points, and yet he scored 81 points in a single game just by getting better than other people. Getting better than other people requires you to have a growth mindset. That's the growth part. You're going to get better so that when you fail, and you will fail over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and it's going to be embarrassing and it's going to hurt and all that, but when you fail, if you believe, oh, failing means that I'm a failure because my talent and intelligence are fixed traits, there's nothing I can do to get better, you will stop. Why wouldn't you? It's the only thing that makes sense. But if, on the other hand, you believe that, oh, I can get better at this. I'm not good enough yet, but I can get good enough by applying time and energy into getting better. So now you'll apply that time and energy because you believe that it will yield the outcome that you want. And that is why it is so critical to get your mind right so that you can run that loop of the physics of progress. Because watch how it breaks down if you don't have a growth mindset. I have a hypothesis. Hey, this is what I need to do. I'm going to try this thing. I tried it. Oh my God, I failed. It's embarrassing. I'm hurt emotionally. People are making fun of me. My parents are telling me, I told you so. Oh my God, I don't want to keep going. And by the way, this is making me really feel badly about myself. So now I'm going to stew over it. I'm going to think about this all the time. Why did I fail, man? I'm cool.
I didn't do anything wrong. Oh, I failed because the world sucks. The world's against me. All the reasons that people make up, not even make up, all the very valid reasons that you were stopped. If you have a fixed mindset, you're going to tell yourself that. You're going to take those excuses because they make you feel better about yourself. And in that moment of emotional crisis that happens every time we fail, you're going to reach for whatever makes you feel better. If, on the other hand, you have a growth mindset, when you hit that moment, you're going to be like, okay, cool, I need to get better at this. I'm going to have to transform my potential into usable skill set and then execute against that. Then you can reformulate your hypothesis, come up with a better action to do, run that, and even though it will fail again to some extent, you'll have made more progress. And when you iterate on that loop enough, just relentlessly getting better, trying new things, making incremental improvement, then you win. And that is the only path to success. Once you decide that you're going to really pursue success, you have to start asking yourself a fundamental question around the growth mindset. If getting a growth mindset is difficult, what is the opposite of that? The opposite of a growth mindset is a fixed mindset. Now, if a growth mindset is defined as, I believe that my talent and intelligence are malleable traits, meaning that I can actually get better at something, a fixed mindset is the opposite, that you're dealt a hand of cards genetically, and it just is what it is. And so your life is really about doing the best you can with the hand that you've been dealt, but there's nothing that you can do to improve. I want to aggressively debunk that myth. So the human animal, every species has to choose to either be born with all of the things you're going to need to do to go be that thing. So a cat is born with all the things that it needs to be a cat. A horse is born with all the things that it needs to be a horse, so on and so forth. And so that's why 20 minutes after being born, a horse can do all of the things that that horse is going to do. It's up, it's walking around, it can run, all of that. Imagine humans getting up and running around 20 minutes after being born. We would lose our minds. We'd freak out. What is going on? That is a child unlike any other child in all of human history, because we have the ability to adapt. And so we chose a very different strategy. So all animals bifurcate between those two things. The vast majority come with almost all or all of things pre-programmed. They just do it instinctively. You don't have to be taught. Now, of course, there are going to be things at the margins, how to better hunt and what stream to go to and all that. So there's some amount of that is going to be learned in the wild. But they're going to be able to do most of the things, like the vast majority, 90+% of the things, right after being born. Humans, on the other hand, can't even hold their own head up. They can't even hold their own head up for months. So we have taken a totally different path, which is the path of adaptation. Now, by choosing that path, we have become the most dominant predator the world has ever seen. So the question becomes, what is it about that setup that means that we need to leverage a growth mindset and completely debunks this idea of a fixed mindset? We know that humans, the average human, is designed to grow and get better. That's what we do. That's the evolutionary strategy that we've chosen. So if we know that the average human is designed to grow and get better, it becomes a question of, are you creating a frame of reference about how you view the world that gets you to take advantage of that? The reason that so many people peak in their teenage years and they don't continue to get better is they have a fixed mindset. So what ends up happening is they go and they try out for basketball, to use my own example, since this was something I struggled with. And I was so unbelievably bad at basketball, it never occurred to me that if I actually worked at practice, that I would get better. So since I was so embarrassed by my lack of talent in basketball, I was always trying to hide on the bench. I didn't want people to pass me the ball. If they passed me the ball, I would panic. I was never thinking about, oh, how do I get better? Like go home, practice dribbling, practice shooting. That didn't even occur to me. I was just like, I'm bad at this thing. I'm never going to get good at this thing. And so I just didn't try. And it was all about hiding. If I had realized, wait a second, the average human is actually designed to get better. Now, it is very important to note that we are not blank slates. So if LeBron James and I had grown up together, done all the same things. I dribbled the ball just as many times as he did. I had the same coaches as he did. I shot as many free throws, practiced step for step in the way that he did. Odds are I'm never going to get as good as he's going to get. He's much taller than I am. He is far more explosive and athletic. He may have a mind that is way better suited to tracking the different things you have to do on the court, from reading the court, understanding the other players, moving his body, all of it. I don't know because I never pushed myself, but I'm going to guess that he's pretty elite from the part of us that is hardwired. Now, science seems to indicate that we are roughly 50% hardwired and 50% malleable. So the odds of me becoming the next LeBron James at basketball is vanishingly slim, though admittedly, I never tried at the peak of my physical prowess, so I can't rule it out. But I am going to say that that doesn't strike me as the right use of my time and energy. But once you realize that a growth mindset is real, you realize that you can get, let's just call it, 100 times better at anything. Now, if you start at a way worse position because you don't have the mental or physical gifts that somebody else has in the 50% that's hardwired, the end point of your 100 times better may be radically different than that person. Fair enough. But once you realize, wait a second, anything in my life I can get 100 times better, that becomes the central question of your life. Once you have a growth mindset and you begin applying that growth mindset, now it's a question of how far can you go if you have a growth mindset? Because you can take yourself extraordinarily far in an area where you've got some positive momentum from the 50% of you that is hardwired. So finding that thing that you both love and have a natural inclination to, and then slather on top of that an obscene amount of work. And if you look at somebody like Kobe Bryant, who inspires the life out of me, that guy worked so hard to get good and put that on top of his already immeasurable gifts. But I would like to point out that not only was he one of the greatest basketball players of all time, he won an Academy Award. He won an Academy Award for a film that he made. So not only was he able to dominate in a sport that you could say arguably he had some really natural talents, I doubt that he also had an equal amount of talent on the filmmaking side, and that, hearing him talk about it, he went out and found the greatest minds in filmmaking and learned from them, worked with them to create something that really was a breathtaking masterpiece. And so understanding that if you 100x your abilities in an area, it will be such a meaningful transformation in your life that your life in that area will be unrecognizable on the other side of that energy and effort. And that ultimately is the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, because a person with a fixed mindset may have had not only the same 50% as somebody who goes on to be very successful, the hardwired 50%, they might be ahead. And this is why when you have people that outwork somebody that has more natural talent than them, they end up going farther. Now, of course, the person that has both the natural talent and the insane work ethic is going to go farther than the person without the natural talent and only the insane work ethic. But since, let me spoiler alert on the human existence, most people quit. Most people give up. Life is going to batter you about. There's going to be so much difficulty in your life. There's going to be failure, pain, suffering, emotional trauma, embarrassment, all of that. Just it chips away at the average person because they aren't relentlessly focused on a growth mindset, and they're building their self-esteem around being right, better, faster, stronger. If, on the other hand, they would focus on the growth mindset, they would realize that they can get better, and they put all of their energy and effort into creating that frame of reference so that they're viewing the world in a way that is optimistic and encouraging them to go in and put that energy and effort into something. Now, because they're seeing that incremental improvement when the world is knocking them about, they realize, oh, I can get better at this. I can outperform more people. And so they're going to be more resilient, and they're not going to be as easy to shut down. They're not going to be as easy to break. And so the people that I have found that are the most resilient in life, they have the most intensely developed growth mindset. And that's part of the key. You really do have to develop a growth mindset. While some people pretty early on realize, like, oh, when I encounter something difficult, I don't have to back down or give in. I can actually push myself, grow, and get better. There's limits to that for most people. And so it really is something that even if you have the beginnings of a growth mindset, you want to make sure that you're sharpening that, and really proving to yourself just how much is possible.
While it's outside the scope of this answer, I will say this is why I think that transforming your physique is one of the most potent things you can do to transform your mind, because it will show you very visually and viscerally that you can go in not being able to lift a weight, you can work your way up to something, and that over time you literally transform your body, your strength, and are capable of doing things you weren't capable of doing before. If you could see what's happening to your brain, I think far more people would push themselves into that zone, because they would realize, like, whoa, I'm really able to get more out of myself now than I was a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. And getting people into that zone where they see the kind of gains that they're making, that's really critical to getting them to continue to crystallize their belief in the growth mindset, which, going back to what I said earlier, gives them the only belief that matters, which is that if I put energy and effort into getting better, I will actually get better, which means that they will continue to pour themselves into getting better at something. And that's the path forward. But you have to be willing to sharpen your growth mindset. If you don't do that, then you're going to be very easy to knock off course, because life is going to prove to you that you really aren't good enough to achieve grand goals. And so that's what ends up breaking somebody with a fixed mindset, because they are constantly confronted with their inadequacies. That feels like a life sentence. They don't think that they're ever going to be able to improve. And so the negative way that they feel about themselves when they're beaten by somebody else, because for better or worse, we are a comparative creature. We compare ourselves to other people all the time. So in that moment of comparison, somebody with a fixed mindset is like, they're better than me. They will always be better than me. I will never achieve what they've achieved. I will never have what they have. And then where does that lead? This is all unfair. Where does that lead? The psychological immune system kicks in. What does the psychological immune system do? It presents you the external reasons why things are the way that they are, assures you that none of this is your fault, which means that you don't retain your power. You don't look at what you could be doing to make a change, to get a better result. And remember, the psychological immune system is pointing out real things. It's pointing out valid excuses. But if you take those excuses and sit in that fixed mindset, you're not going to get where you want to go. And this is the thing I'm obsessed with in my life. Read a lot of internet comments, and I see over and over and over people looking at other people that are more successful than they are, and they meet it with vitriol. They are so angry. The system is broken. I'm not saying it's not, but that's what they're focused on. The system is broken. This person has scammed the world. Let's say that they have. Let's say that the system is broken and that person has scammed the world. How does that help you? How does that push you towards your goals? How does giving up and saying it's all so corrupt, we're never going to get anywhere? Think about the greatest people in history, the people that have just done insane things. My go-to is always Nelson Mandela. I cannot imagine, other than outright slavery, I cannot imagine a system more stacked against somebody than what happened to Nelson Mandela. He was put in prison and literally treated like a slave for 27 years, and yet came out of that and helped unite a country and move people forward. And so he had every excuse at his disposal as to why he couldn't make something of his life. And he becomes one of the most important people in modern history. Guys, don't grab excuses, not because they're not real, not because they're not valid. Don't grab excuses because it will stop you from achieving what you want to achieve in your life. The greatest walking among us are all the people that realize, yeah, these are valid. These are very real reasons why it's harder for me than somebody else. And this sucks, and I wish it wasn't so. But they deal with the world the way that it is, not the way they wish it were. And the way that the world is you can get better at anything if you have a growth mindset. You can 100x your abilities. And if you stay focused, you don't break, you don't give in, there's virtually no limit to what you can accomplish.
If you want to learn more about this topic, check out this interview.
Emotion is what starts wars. It's what ends wars. Emotion is what gets you married. Emotion is where kids comes from. Divorce is where emotion comes from. Everything that you can think of a major change in humanity, from the most extreme of war to the most gentle of love, all come from human emotions.